Okay, I'll go back to the next session. Go forward. Next item, Jane.
Okay, right, so there was a little bit of feedback about our ability to manage project costs and the way that we budget for projects. Is there anything that you want to do around that?
Is that a discussion that will come out of audit risk, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than having it in this environment here? Unless we want to make changes to anything like the plan that's going to affect project management.
We've got mapped, so we've got one dedicated project management resource. So the only decision for the LTP would be, do we need another one or not? And my feeling right at this moment is that we're probably okay where we are, and if the discussions that we have in the next couple of months say we need different, then we would address that in the next annual plan.
Good. So we tend to rely on external advisors to help us set budgets. So all our projects we've relied externally rather than ourselves, except for the pretty straightforward projects, infrastructure projects. Where Tony's really good. It's just more of the day-to-day stuff rather than the big projects.
So the big ticket item are basically project specific. So to employ a project manager that's going to manage all types of projects is difficult. I think it has to be, I mean, really good having one in-house. I agree with that, but I think if anything is outside the capabilities and qualifications of the guy that we've got in-house, well, yeah, I think that's the time to look at it then. You know, I don't think I can do anything else other than that. Or if that council employee feels like he needs assistance, you know, that would be the time. Or we feel as a council that assistance might be a good idea. To be fair to Matt, I mean, at some stages of the project, he's probably carrying his head. Yeah. Nature of these.
I'm inclined to push pause on this discussion until we're all on the same sheet of music, because some of you guys have been briefed whereas some of us haven't, so we're not all speaking from the same foundation. So unless, and I'll take it from you guys, unless you feel that there needs to be some change in the LTP, I think we should wait and discuss it together later. If there's no change proposed, then shall we?
Okay, we do that? Okay, all agreement, yep.
So what was the question?
The questions around project management and whether what we're doing is right or adequate. And I've just pointed out that only some of us have been briefed on what's happened recently, and that we should just shelve this discussion until we're all on the same sheet of music. Yep. Cool. Okay.
So when are we shelving it to?
INS, I guess.
After the project debrief of
So audit and risk on the 12th. Minutes.
I probably prefer that there was a full council discussion, so that audit and risk would make a recommendation to full council rather than a committee. Simply because we're not a committee.
I'm not saying it has to happen then, I'm just saying it can't happen before. We all need to be privy to the same information.
I agree.
Yeah, and we're going to have reports on our major projects, and from those reports, the need may or may not be identified whether we need to have that discussion or not. If there's a need to have that discussion. Is that right? Okay, cool.
Okay, the Eastern Growth Area, so there's a little bit of feedback on there. So there's a comment around, do we expand the town or do we just look at our existing footprint and focus on our existing infrastructure, make it more resilient. There's the question around the infrastructure costs, and other health services, and are they going to be provided for, and just questions around the financial contributions element.
I'll start that off, and I'm really comfortable with the process that we've had going forward with that. Those issues have been addressed as we've gone forward. We consulted with the community, and overwhelming feedback was to pursue it, but obviously there were very like-minded themes that we wanted to pursue in there. Yeah, so that's where I am. Anyway, well,
No, so we've got good information, good answers for all of the issues raised, which will go back to the submitters, responses. I don't foresee any need to change based on those submissions.
were we waiting for Kelly, or were you doing for
Oh,
Kelly?
sorry, we've lost Kelly. Kelly's the home child. And Dave's doing some other work, so he will be there.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I think the submissions we got from our community engagement on the Eastern Growth were quite robust, and I agree. I think it's being able to reply back, and also the submissions that we did receive, and also from the 10-year plan and the Eastern Growth consultation will feed into the district plan review.
Thank you. Russell?
Yeah, let's leave it as it is at the moment.
Rebecca?
Yeah, all the above, that's already been said. The only thing I would add is, I would like to add in the activity section of the LTP, just some words around our intentions to change the development contributions policy, and our intentions that it will be increased significantly to cover a lot of those expenses, because we can't forecast that income against those expenses, but at least we can signal our intention that we're getting down that route.
I think I might have been wrong in that yesterday, because Jane, you suggested that maybe we had included them.
We have
Assumptions.
Pretty sure it is, but I'm
Yeah.
under assumption.
We also need to be careful to talk about financial contributions versus development contributions.
I know, I always get them confused.
Yeah.
Is the development contributions are district plan?
No.
No, other way around. Yeah,
Financials RMA.
yeah.
So I think we do,
development schemes, yeah.
I'll have to go back and have a proper read through, but I think we do have a good summary under urban growth, which is kind of under the governance section, but then when you actually get down to the detail of those individual sections, I don't think we mention that we're planning to increase our income to offset the expenditure.
so we can think of that.
Okay, comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Yep.
Rob?
Yeah, obviously I've got a conflict there, but if you're looking at financial contributions, I think it's got to be not just pertain to the Eastern Growth, it's got to be across the board. And I think that needs to be.
Are we recording?
Yes, I can do that. Yeah, so if I just have a look, I'm just looking at the, say, roading, under our key assumptions for roading, it doesn't say anything about our intention to increase the contributions at all.
Sorry, I'm not with you.
Financial contributions, so if you have a look at
What page are you on, Jill?
That's
so
the
it's all the
commission.
things, financial contributions. What page?
When I heard it. What's the title heading? Because I might have
Financial contributions. Oh, this is the assumptions.
Assumptions.
So name of the expenses. So in the numbers, I'm pretty sure we've assumed increased financial contributions. Oh,
Okay, we'll leave that one, and can you read Jane next one?
Sorry, I was just doing that. So under our assumption number 14, it says this 10-year plan assumes that financial contributions will continue at a similar level of revenue. So that's wrong. It's either right or it's wrong. If it's right, it doesn't reflect that we're planning to up them. That's on page 102. So assumption 14 in the financial assumptions.
Okay, we'll sort that one.
It does note that they will be reviewed in years 1 to 3.
So does that change what's written in the list as well? Because it will change?
Well, you can't have will, but it does. Because it's subject to public consultation and the statutory process.
Yes, and financial contributions will be reviewed as part of the
Yeah, so I think,
DP.
so on basically I'm just now trying to remember how we sort that. Maybe we haven't assumed in the financials, but we're expecting that to change.
It does say that council has an option to develop the contributions, but because of the proposed uncertainties with 3 wards and RMA, we did decide not to develop a policy at this time.
But to be fair,
So our expectation is it will change, and that therefore financial contributions would contribute to around 95% of the costs, or 95. That may not yet be reflected in the numbers because the financial contributions haven't changed yet. But the Eastern Road area won't start until the financial contributions provisions have changed, because it can't, because the changes that will enable it to happen, plan changes on zoning, will also happen at the same time as the financial contributions change. And that will be part of your section 32 analysis.
so do we need to update that financial contribution assumption? Does that need to be in motion?
Yeah.
Or because it's not, well,
Yeah, so I'll have to check, it probably does assume that the financial contributions haven't yet changed, but we can put some commentary in about the expectation and the fact that the financial contributions would change, provisions would change at the same time as the Eastern Road area zoning changes.
Yep.
So if the financial contributions don't change, then the council has got the choice of not going ahead or doing it some other way.
I guess it's quite hard to budget for financial contributions though, about when you'd actually expect that income to come in though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the staging of it, it will be a best estimate, which is what it's sitting there at the moment, it's a best estimate. But remember, it's loan funded, and then the expectation is that the district plan change to the financial contributions will then match the requirement to pay those loans.
Yes.
So in the long run, it won't be exactly cost neutral for the ratepayer, but it will be pretty close to it. It just affects our level of borrowing, but there is plenty of headroom there. Notwithstanding, some people do have a concern over our borrowing levels.
Okay. Comfortable? Yep. Okay, next one. Yep.
So there's just a small change here, which is adding some applications to those assumptions.
Yes.
Okay, so on the ones, the water loan, so a few people have questioned that. There was a question yesterday, I think, from Marty about whether it meets our investment policy. It does. I've had another review of it, and yes, it does meet our investment policy. But if you want to have a read yourselves, the investment policies are in the draft agenda plan. Your financial policies. But a few people have just questioned whether it's appropriate for the council to make the loan. They're questioning the risks associated with it, and the interest rate that we might charge to cover the risks. So just to remind councillors, the loan is 400,000. it will be an unsecured loan, so if the company, so the reason the company is asking councils to make loan provisions is there will be a gap between the funding that they've got from the PGF and other Crown sources to do the work, to get consents and then go out to the market to get shareholders. There is a gap there that they will need, that they're looking to fill. They can't borrow from any commercial place because they don't have assets. So they're sort of caught in that place where they can't borrow commercially, so they're looking to the councils to fund them.
So is that kind of like a really basic terms, bridging loan
It
until
is
that,
like
it's a bridging loan
Yeah,
effectively from the
yeah.
councils?
But if they can't secure investors, then there is a risk to that loan being paid back. And there is a risk it's
I don't mind saying that, you know, like early on I expressed concern over this, but I took heart from the fact that this will come back to the council for decision with the terms, and we'll know more about where they're at with their consenting process, and we'll have the option of not voting for it. So I share the concerns that are raised. I don't know the answers or enough to make a determination as to whether the concerns are valid or not, and I'm just going to wait until that comes to fruition. I wouldn't take it out.
It's in the next financial year, right?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. First year.
First year, isn't it?
Yes.
So you won.
Yeah.
Yes, you won.
How likely is that to actually come to us in the next year?
I think at this point it's unlikely, but I don't know for certain. Again, it's a loan, so it's not, you're not setting, you're taking rates.
I think the biggest risk is the security of it.
Yep.
By far, that's the bit that scares the hell out of me.
But the caveat on that is that when I talk to, you know, my farming friends, rural people, they think this is a fantastic idea. They've put their own money in, skin in the game to make this happen. So regardless of my personal opinions, I need to look at it objectively and say, well, is this something that we as a district might support? And at the moment, I don't know because I don't have the details.
Yeah, I think that the risk at the moment is being spelled out by our ratepayers at the moment, thinking that we're, and it was probably not explained properly, that it's a bridging loan only, but I think once they find out that it's unsecured, I think the risk will increase on our reputation, will increase.
So the rationale for the loan provision, it's not an investment in a traditional investment sense. It is to enable a significant economic development opportunity. So that's the, mind you what we're doing.
And we have supported it through different mechanisms up until now over the long lead up.
Yeah, not quite at such a level.
I think probably the only thing we can do is leave it there until we find out more information.
Yeah, I reckon.
Just
Yeah, we've got
the
all the information
security of
to-
it. Just
Jen?
worried about the security.
Oh, yeah, exactly, unsecured is always a risk.
Jane, once the official release comes through, would we get like legal advice to draw up the terms and conditions and everything?
Yeah, so we've already got a draft agreement that's been used elsewhere, so sort of seen that, but yes, it would go through lawyers, absolutely. Yeah, so it's been the four councils, so it's us and Greater Wellington and Marsden and South Wellington, so we would all be doing the same, having the same agreement.
When you say used elsewhere, is there other examples around the country of that?
Yep, in the South Island, so it's that some of the Central Otago schemes used council.
Did they get their money back?
Well, at least one council, I can't remember which one it is, actually took, lent the money as an investment, as a true investment, so they're a shareholding. I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any that didn't get their money back, but I don't know what the situation up in Spey was and what the council's funded there.
And then I guess my last question was, what are they looking for the term of the loan?
We had to wait to see, so it's really only bridging the gap between them getting their consents and finishing off the consents and getting the investment, so however long that's going to take, I don't know.
So less than 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be about a matter of, well, I say months, 2 years maybe.
Oh, okay, so less than 5 years.
Yeah.
What's Great Wellington's?
They've had massive input into it, yeah.
They've invested millions.
How
Yes,
likely
yes,
is the
well,
natural resources plan going to be in kind of going against?
Yeah, that is going to be a bit of a challenge.
To me, they're fighting against themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of ironic stuff. So the storage project itself has significant benefits for the environment. If you look at the way that they're proposing to discharge into some natural streams. But that's not recognised the way that the natural resources plan is currently being drafted. And it's avoiding summertime river obstructions, which again will help inland flows.
I think that one of the messages our community is wanting to know too, which we can deliver at some stage, I suppose, is if we go, there's a perception that we're going to be funding the project, you know, and as you can see from earlier discussions, we're not in a position to be able to fund a project like that. So this is probably our skin in the game, what we've done up until now on this, yeah.
What's a bridging loan?
I guess the other question is if we had other economic opportunities come to us, that are of a almost significant scale, would we fund them as well?
We're not funding, we're lending.
Lending,
So,
okay.
so
Would we
gotta be
lend
really
them
clear
as
on the
well?
wording.
Would we lend them as well?
Yeah, this is sort of different because we've been involved with this process right from the start, and so we've had quite a bit to do with it. Whereas I think there'd been other lead-ins like this to be in a similar position. Yeah. So I can't remember when this
For
project
example,
started.
Stonehenge, if they wanted to do something amazing out where they're doing, you know?
Well, I suppose everything's changed on its merit. And when did this project start? 2008,
Would be
2006?
at least 10 years ago.
Yeah.
12 year old, to be honest with you, I think that's about 20 years ago. Really? And the difference here is that they can't loan because they have no asset. So someone like Stonehenge, they have assets, so they could actually get their own loan.
Okay, so I think we landed there. We'll just leave it in there. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Federated Farmers, Kiwi Took Covenant Land. So they've asked for automatic rates for emissions on land that is Carterton. So at the moment in your revenue and financing policy, there is a rates for emission available to Carterton land. It's not automatic, so whoever covers the land has to come to us and rates for it. Now we've just got a bit of an issue that we don't necessarily know where the Carterton land is.
Well, if that permission is already in there, I feel like that covers the request. What number submission was that? Does anyone have that in front of them?
Yep.
So it's not automatic.
159.
James, do they have to come to us with their GIS map basically?
Yes,
The policy is really clear. The onus is on the ratepayer, and it's it's not just QE2 stuff. It's like ratepayers who own rating units have some feature of cultural, natural or historic heritage that is voluntarily protected may qualify for remission of rates under this part of the policy. I don't think we need to make anything automatic.
No.
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 So just the policy's perfect.
The option's there, it's, the onus is on them to do it. If we make it automatic, then the onus becomes on us to make sure that we've given it to them.
And
Yeah.
then more resources to be able
Same
to
as
make,
our other
yeah,
And you'll find every landowner who's got a barrel wheel.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
So,
Agreed.
Okay, we will end it there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so another one from Fred Farm is related to natural disaster rates remission. So they wanted droughts to be added. So if you read the natural disasters rates remission part of the policy, it doesn't exclude droughts. So the objective is to provide relief for properties affected by natural disasters. The conditions and criteria the council will remit rates to those properties identified according to the conditions and criteria set by central government. And the level of emissions will be the extent of funding provided by central government.
that's it, there's no change needed.
No.
Because that was exactly what I was going to say, it had to be
Central government,
whatever, that's the trigger of central government, how much money they're going to give us to give them.
yeah.
And also saw what happened during COVID-19 lockdown too, you know, we had conversations with individual ratepayers and worked out payment plans and assisted in other ways, so yeah, there's a few tools there. Okay, all agree?
Yeah.
Right, next one, Water Safety Commission.
What about bids with the rural dogs?
Oh yeah, that's on the list, just further down the list,
Oh, okay.
do you want to do the dogs?
No, what safety.
Yeah, so it's a little bit random, sorry, this list. Water Safety Commission, so the Water Safety Council, I think, is the subcommittee who asked you to consider doing more promotion.
That wasn't very specific, was it? It was sort of
No.
generic.
Generic, it'll be sent to everyone.
So there's to be a resource on our content.
Well, could be more than that.
Community services.
Community services, yeah.
Yeah, how is
Funded, stuff,
Yeah.
life saving in the past, so we've been, South End School, we funded them to go out and do swimming programs out at the beach, we've done little things, but not own the whole of it.
I think that's sufficient.
And all the schools
Focused
go
on
and
our
do their
district.
swimming lessons for free on
Yeah.
the
At our
lake,
free pool.
in the pool,
Yeah.
every summer, they just pay for their own lifeguard.
We just need a reply.
I mean, talking out of the kids' rate by Masterton, it's all in the number of kids that can't swim. So if local governments, if we're going to put a remit into local government, it's central government to assist paying for swimming lessons.
They have funding, I know in Masterton, the schools have got to do a certain amount of free swimming lessons. I don't know if that was Trust House funding or central government.
But that's not really council's
No.
remit.
No, yeah, but it comes from a community,
Yeah.
but anyway. So what's the consensus on the water safety council?
Thank you for your submission, noted.
Send them this.
Perhaps
Yeah,
send them what we
so
do,
yeah.
Yeah,
so they see that we are doing something, not nothing.
and they can promote that for us too.
Isn't the swimming club who provides the lifeguards at the swimming pool?
No, or for the outdoor pool, we do,
Yeah, so things like that.
Yeah.
it's a requirement.
I mean, if they have specific projects that they are wishing to fund from the district, they can apply for grants committee.
And also, from a water safety point of view, by making a swimming pool free, kids that couldn't afford to go to a pool are going there rather than going to dangerous river spots and things like themselves.
Perhaps we should get back at them, telling them all the things we do, but how about looking at
They might give us
funding
something.
swimming lessons for community council?
They might give us funding. Yeah.
Okay, and the next one is Don McMillan's request for funding the
In reality, no.
No. If anything, I would tell them to apply to grant committee, but I'm just not sure if it actually matched
No,
up.
it doesn't match our criteria.
I did go check out the cenotaph though, and we definitely do have a Hugh Edgar McKinnon, who died in World War I in that place, which I can't pronounce. Wernar or something.
I think you need to finish off your project and see if they're related to Don McKinnon.
Then we're true, yeah.
We'll ask you every meeting.
I don't believe it doesn't meet our community grants criteria.
It's just a project there.
right, climate change. Need to do more in the area of climate change. Climate change needs to be more visually or more prominent. All the considerations need to be prominent.
Well, just agreed to increase the funding for Warrior schools, so that's a start.
We're at a hiding to nothing with climate change, really, now.
And Melanie's said she's looking forward to the additional funding this year. We've got 3 years worth of 3 years. Okay, this little bit of extra funding. We've now got 3 years worth of data just to sort of show what's happening. There is a plan that's been rolled out slowly.
I don't think people realise what we're doing.
And maybe that's what we're going to do,
it's-
is tell the
It's hard
story
to
a bit more.
promote.
Yeah.
It's, the strategies on the website, but it's, because it's the Mahanga strategy people, if they're going looking for climate change, climate emergency, then they're not going to find it unless they know what we've called it. So I think from a visibility, easy access to see what we are doing, it's not that visible for Joe Public. We know where to find it because we know what it's called, but Joe Public, who just wants to jump on and go, what's Carterton District Council doing? It doesn't pop up.
So Robin, can I just
I
jump
think-
in? Regan and I are actually doing a full review of the website, and part of it is fixing the search function because it doesn't work properly.
Yeah.
So Marty wasn't even finding the climate change page at all. There's like a whole page dedicated to it, and we're also changing the layout. But it's going to be a long project, working with all the different departments as well.
Oh, that's great.
But that is happening.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's brilliant news. Thank you.
From my personal, I'd like to see Carterton have a climate change advisor like Melanie full time going forward. I know it's a cost, but there's so much emphasis on it now. We have to put into everything, all decisions that we make now. We should be considering it. So I think having someone in house who can guide us in that. I think it's something that we should definitely be looking at. Whether it's going to be, we may lose somewhere else, I don't know, but I think there's just so much focus on it now that.
Yeah. Have you got another, so when we're talking climate change now, the climate emergency comments, is that another bullet?
No, we've just said climate change when we put on the
So it's
this is
all
everything.
together?
So yeah, so if you were to look at your own 10-year plan through the lens of we are in the middle of a climate emergency, I think you would be very disappointed with what you see. So that's the reality.
Yeah.
But you've got a number of things that you need to provide for in the 10-year plan. So it's the challenge to you, from what I heard coming from the Smith is, you need to do more is what they said. And you need to decide whether you need to do more.
It's a shame that Dale's not here and couldn't speak to what he said on the stage, with the Meet the Candidates thing, about how this climate emergency and this ever-present thing, it's affecting national stuff. There should be more stuff coming out of central government to kind of help solve and provide direction to some of these issues. So, we're at a hiding to nothing. It's more of the central government abdicating responsibility, saying, hey, you local government, you guys just deal with it. You can take the heat. Your ratepayers can complain to you, rather than petitioning central government to fund stuff. Promote EVs, promote environmental stuff.
Steve, I really take your point, but if we're going to increase that capacity, we also need to increase funding to do stuff as well, and that's the big issue, and it's just not affordable to, well, you know, electric vehicles, they will come, but we haven't gone there yet because they're just not affordable for us at this current stage, but they will come, and there's a plan in place, I hope, to address which ones will come first.
Question for Jerry. If we were to increase, well, I don't disagree with what Steve's suggesting, but would we need more of Melanie, or does Melanie need more resource to do what Melanie does? You know, is it her that's the bottleneck, or is it the fact that she's got no resource to do the things that she would do otherwise do?
The resource,
So-
she's pretty amazing in that space as well. So remembering that she does 20 hours for us and 10 hours for South as well. But one of the things I heard yesterday was reflecting towards more outward looking in some of that work, so the community kind of champion, and perhaps that's what the community aren't hearing. So we're doing a lot internally that we know about, but the public don't necessarily. And maybe some of that sort of extra resources would be reflected in a more outward facing or a community lead, not unlike Jodine, to the waste, you know, that kind of waste champion. So it's more driving the community towards. So mostly it doesn't require too much resourcing outside of the staff hours. If you're just advocating or leading through some comms, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so by reflecting back to you, what I'm hearing is that having her for more hours wouldn't have as much effect as giving her more.
Oh, no, well, having her more hours. But
So it is having her for more hours. Okay, so it's more of her.
She's pretty busy in the 20 hours that she gives us, and so anything more we can have.
Does she have capacity to give us more hours?
She would probably have to negotiate with South, or we would negotiate with South on reducing what she does down there.
Okay.
So that
So we are looking
unlikely that she would give us another 10, be able to give us another 10 hours, so that she gets full time at this stage. Not to say that we couldn't use 10 hours elsewhere, so someone else maybe in his team could pick up the community aspect or the outward facing. So if she couldn't do it, we could pick it up somewhere else, but she has a lead on it as such.
But we don't, we wouldn't do that with an assistant resource.
Yeah, it would be
extra,
extra.
not to more resource to do it.
Possibly even in the comms team, we might be able to pick up some of that community out.
Yeah, I was just wondering if some of this would be alleviated by Melanie and myself, if there's capacity there or somewhere else, but doing some kind of maybe a quarterly climate change newsletter or some kind of communication that would help communicate what is happening,
We want
but
to
that's
change
separate to the community.
things we do, but more than that, I think the challenge was.
Yeah.
It's a little bit often, it needs to be kind of in the public view all the time.
And it's getting more in depth about how the whole of Carterton District Council can lower our emissions, and it's going to take a lot of time for Melanie to go through everything and try
And there's an expectation for us to, for our community to do the same too, you know, which is a huge new tranche.
So what is the dollar figure that we added this year? How much did we add it by? It wasn't
very much, was it? But the other thing, yet again, central government, New Zealand is going to be carbon neutral by 2050. Fabulous. Great. And we have to deliver again. And that's what it
because we're the ones fighting the community.
Yeah, but without any, again,
So
without any
Carterton District
assistance.
Council are getting a focus group, and there's going to be 10 people, and I understand that it's likely that there may be some Carterton people on their group. So that's good.
Would they have any appetite to making it a wider upper focus
Well,
group?
it will be.
kind of will be.
It will be,
Yeah.
it will be.
That's cool.
So a lot of it's up to us as well, you know, when we have our debates, you know, we could challenge the effects on climate change a bit more perhaps when we make decisions, and also champion it ourselves as around the community. Yeah, Joe? Yeah.
I'm just sort of thinking that, you know, there's the converted and then there's the to be converted. So the converted will be the ones that will engage with the focus groups and so on.
Yep.
That's not the target, I think, of if you want to make a change and raise people's awareness, it's the others, the rest, and that's what takes the time and resource to get information to and convince that actually it isn't, this is stupid.
And with those yet to be convinced, unfortunately, and I was having a conversation about this last night, with, you know, because the high percentage of ageing population that we have, a lot of that demographic don't believe there's an issue. I mean, a small minority do, but a majority don't, and it's going back to that. So it's not that I guess probably we have a high percentage of cynical people in New Zealand in relation to climate
sometimes you don't actually
emergency.
Everybody, you just actually promote change of behaviour, and you don't even call it climate change, you call it something else, which is actually going to help.
Build a cycle trail.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as recycling. You know, some people in that demographic don't recycle, they don't understand. You know, so I mean, it's changing.
Can I just ask Jane, before you said that people with our LTP through a climate change lens would be quite disappointed. What do you mean by that? Is it just our wording, or is it the specific projects that we're funding?
Yeah, so that's what we do. I mean, it's not, so if I was so you know how you run various scenarios when you're sort of doing strategic planning and stuff, and one of the scenarios that you can run, and we did this with the group, you run it through a lens of climate change. Well, I think we would probably be doing a lot more in non-vehicle movement, like transport and stuff, so we'd invest a lot more in walking, cycling, trails. You'd probably quadruple plus your pedestrian or your footpath, but you do everything you could to get people out of their cars, recognising that people still need cars. You would have EV stations or charging stations all over the place, so you'd see a lot more of that. But you're balancing climate change with affordability, with a whole lot of other social wellbeing elements, environmental wellbeing elements in terms of, you know, investing in our infrastructure to minimise damage to the environment. So, you know, for you it's a balancing act.
And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is having that person there who can provide that guidance to us to help us make those decisions and where we can best help our community.
So we'll carry on around the room. Good point raised, Steve, to start with, so thank you, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think the main gap that I can see is that average ratepayer doesn't know or doesn't understand what we're doing, and it's a comms, it's a newsletter, it's getting the word out there on what we're doing at the moment. Because I actually think we're doing pretty, in my eyes, we're doing pretty well, but I don't think the public know that.
Okay, thank you, Jill.
Yeah, I sort of think that, I mean, obviously, you know, I've been on this thing since about 2003 when Carterton became, I think it was the 50th Council in New Zealand, the Community Climate Protection. That was all funded by central government, it was not funded by ratepayers, and then National Court applied on that funding when they got in a few years later. So, you know, today, compared with that, we are so much ahead. And mainly it's because the national media have picked it up big time. So, you know, it's going to happen. And I don't actually think we need to put too much resource into it in lots of ways, but it is actually happening. Our kids are understanding it. It's been discussed and talked about. People can actually witness the climate around them changing. If they've been here for X number of years, they know it is changing, we all know that. So, yeah, I just think it's one of those things. So, I think, yep, we could probably tell our story about what we are doing, probably. And I guess trying to attend as many sort of environmental awareness events we can to show that we do care and we're learning, because we learn all the time. Steve and I, it's been good with Climate Change Caucus, probably one of my favourite hours in council, where we Zoom to Natasha and Melanie and some of the other, Chris Peterson and Ra. It's good, isn't it? It's good, isn't it? We have a little agenda and you sort of think, oh, that'll be 10, 15 minutes, and an hour goes by. So it's great, and we're all Zooming, we're not actually meeting face to face. Chris would like to meet face to face, but it doesn't mean he says, I want to meet face to face. But yeah, no, it's good. So there is quite a lot happening, I guess, yeah, from my perspective.
So maybe out of that climate change caucus meetings that you guys are doing,
Yeah.
it would be really cool to, I don't know, just have some comms about what's coming, what are the actions that have come out of that meeting, those meetings?
Yeah, so
Would be really good to deliver.
there are, well, I think
That'd be really interesting.
Melanie kind of alluded to quite a bit of stuff that she at the courthouse that we did, so there are some good things.
But they're net feeding out
Yep.
as well, so it's great that, you know, you're able to feed back to us, and, you know, if it's, you know, it's, I can tell by how animated you are,
I mean, there are things.
how much of a highlight it is. That would be, that kind of stuff would be really good to put out to the community somehow
and
too.
because we're a small group, I mean, just I guess last time we kind of talked about what was in our long-term plans. That's quite good, isn't it? We talked about the Waimea Road, the Makariri. We had a whole lot of different things that were surrounded by it. And then I mean, as you probably know, there's a water resilience hall on Monday, so that'll click in. And then Steve suggested that the Makariri Restoration Society hold their AGM and get this guy called Nick Golich, so we're organising that. So we will invite all of the climate change people to that AGM to listen to that speaker. So again, yeah, there's heaps of things happening.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? I'm opposed, but the climate change caucus, is it your view that we're doing enough? You looked at you said you
Yeah.
LTPs and things.
Yeah. I mean, my personal opinion, well, we talked about that, and I sort of did a quick, you know, how many climate change phrases came up in our LTP, which was 53, and I went into all of those different things and looked, and every single activity we do have stuff about climate change. Okay, so it's in there, and all the activities we do.
Do you think what's in there is sufficient?
I think at the moment, when you consider everything else we have to consider, you know, there's you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's really good with your.
This is what submitters don't really sort of get. They obviously have their bandwagon, so to speak. Yeah.
But it's reassuring to hear that you, Jill, is saying that actually our LTP with your climate change caucus hat on and stuff, that what we have got in there you believe is sufficient. So that's good enough for me.
And Martin's been doing very well. Chris is obviously driving that, and Natasha's great. The South are a little bit not. No, again, they're not really. It depends on the people, you know.
Yeah.
Their council not really particularly performing, but that's up to them.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm comfortable where we are at the moment. I think we could probably document better what we're doing, and possibly even in some of our reports that come through, we could possibly beef up the climate change consideration section. But like you said, Greg, that's also, I think it was you, it's also on us to be asking those questions. The other thing about this is I feel like it is quite urban focused, our climate change, if we're going, so I wouldn't necessarily understand what that would look like from a rural perspective as well, because they do need to drive, they do have their carbon emissions, and I think that is a behaviour change that may happen, but
I think if the rural community is more engaged in the
Because
they have to. It's
yeah.
part of everything they do.
Because they're so aware of the climate.
Well,
I think they're very engaged.
And what regulation is going to be.
so that's why I'm saying I think the majority of the behaviour change that we need to see is probably more within our urban areas. Contractors, this is what came up yesterday as well. Do we need to add them to our carbon emission inventory? I think that's probably a good idea going forward in a way that we can grow, but I do see that's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work.
Isn't the roading Road, they submit into us?
That was talked about at our courthouse meeting.
Yeah.
Melanie mentioned all that.
Okay,
I
so
think
they
that
are
is
part of our carbon emission inventory.
I'm pretty sure that's
Pretty
all
sure
part of
that,
our,
yeah.
because
No.
Would that be part of, no, not broadly, we do get information out of Fulton Hoven, but not all our contractors. So if you want us to look at the climate, the mitigation or the CO2 emission or whatever it's these days, for all of our contractors, then that will just add a lot of the cost on to our procurement. And it will add a bit to our workload around reporting, collecting information and reporting.
I mean, none of that sounds appealing to me right now.
Well, Fort and Hogan are kind of our biggest contractor, so if we're already getting it from them,
Yeah,
that's a,
that's fine. I didn't recall seeing that under our main activity areas, so it could be in there. And the other one, I guess, is probably our waste environmental. That's part of the other key one. Okay, that's right. So that's a comment. I think Enviro Schools, it's your biggest, not your biggest bang for buck, but that's almost where you need to focus a lot of this community education is our young people and that, because they bring it home with them. Marley was doing about recycling and now she's going on and on about recycling in our house and she's not even 6. So anyway, yeah, that's me anyway.
Thank you. Russell?
Yeah, it's pretty much all been said. There's, wish we could do more, can't afford to do more. Yes,
Okay.
only central government will do more.
Thank you. Robert?
I've already
Yeah.
probably said enough.
Rob? Was? Yeah, thank you. I agree with everyone said. Just the signals that are coming through this side of things is putting more resource, or we need more resource into our comms. That's what's going to happen, is because we're getting told we're not telling the stories of projects, and so that's something we need to address too, I believe, is how we resource our comms. Yeah.
How are we getting on our list? Do we need to have list discussion?
Yeah.
If we need to speed things up a little bit. Sorry, I know I'm like half the problem.
Because
quite easy ones.
they've been
So
linked together.
got
Yeah.
the big ones.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
Right. Go home.
Yeah, I'm just like conscious, I'd like to be finished by 5. Yeah.
I thought I'm the one that should be asking that. Oh, it's my birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, you love spending the whole day with us. You just want to spend longer with us, Steve.
Okay, so we're comfortable where we landed there? It's just delivering the messages.
So we are putting more resource in, or you're not?
No.
To be honest, I'd actually like to be guided by Melanie a little bit in that.
Should say put more
So
resource.
of course, someone's going to voice
Yeah,
that
but
more.
So if you want us to do more promoting climate change mitigation initiatives or awareness, that will be more resource. We won't be able to sort of that.
Which I don't think we do. I think that there's plenty out there, if you look at national media, etc. People are getting very aware of what to do.
I think it was specifically about our submitters saying that they're not hearing anything from us.
So I'll give it
Well, we need to get our website.
I'll put it on us to tell that story.
Yeah.
And just the conversations we have, we just bring it into our conversation.
Yeah.
I think we're probably going to talk about the telling the story communications coming up, but I think if we could clone Elisa, then some of these other issues around telling the story for climate change, they would go away. So the questions for me is not directly climate change, but more about that comms and having more capacity there. If we're going to increase capacity.
I agree.
Okay.
But we will look at the business as usual language because we hear that as well.
Yes.
So sort of related, a request for more environmental initiatives, including EVs, greener transport options, etc.
It's work in progress, really.
Covered in our strategy.
It's the same with some of the stories.
Yep.
Some of the staff have bought e-bikes.
Within the district plan, are we looking at increasing or enforcing cycle routes within new developments and that sort of thing?
Yep, so the structure plan will have built into it really good sort of walking and cycling connections.
No, but like overall, so new within the town, not just Eastern Growth as well?
Can't retrospectively enforce it
Yeah.
unless the land's been redeveloped, and then you can exert some influence.
Yeah, no, I mean for like ones that are going to be proposed, and because we still have a few spots within the town where there could be.
They're not very big spots though,
Okay.
but it could possibly be, but there's not really that.
You've got footpaths requirement. so that's really required for subdivision.
Okay.
Okay.
There was a couple, yeah, I did note a couple of comments around the links between the subdivisions currently, but that's us.
Okay, and the essence of efficiency, are we happy with that? That's in the strategy? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Food producing area, what do you call it?
Oh, that was somebody wanting to plant fruit trees on the berms.
We're trying to get the trees off the berms.
Of the
actually, aren't
berms,
we?
yeah.
You've got policies in there. It also was talked about through the placemaking advisory group on stage, wasn't it? Having gardens on berms and
We've got a tree policy now.
Yeah.
And in Sparks Park, there's fruit trees, and there'll be other opportunities to have grow in public spaces.
Sport Wellington. So Sport Wellington came to us for some more.
They want us to fund somebody on a no for that.
No.
How much was it there?
I think it was $2,000 over 3 years, something.
Yeah,
Yeah, $2,000 for the next 3 years. Guide the implementation of Wellington Region Spaces and Places Plan, regional facility development, provide support and advice to facility development.
To the sports event, Steve, what's your opinion?
Yeah, they got Dale Clarkson over here, so I've asked her to send me information and find out how they can start instilling some of the things which are happening over in Wellington with the new food regime in schools and things like that, but yeah, I think it needs to be led by the board, not us. So I'm happy we're not putting any money into it.
Okay, it's a project we support, but not financially.
Does Linda have any opinion on it?
Yep. So they've just started a new group, which is the Living Well Wider Upper group. I'm just going to read from the notes, sorry.
What's it called, sorry?
Living Well Wider Upper.
Living Well.
Yeah. And they've just come out with the new 30-year strategy for how they're going to be changing things and doing things. And they've got a real strong focus on same thing well-beings, which quite align with our well-beings. And one of the conversations within that group is how we can all work better together. But in saying that, so that group, that meeting is the three councils and Sports Wider Upper Wellington. So there is a lot of work we are, I suppose, supporting them with the work that they're doing in a roundabout way, just not financially. We used to have an EAU with them, didn't we?
We have always funded, I think to the tune of around $2,500 each year for various programs.
Yeah.
Through partnerships.
Last year they didn't, they applied for the community grants, but they didn't get that because they were asking for a specific program. And we already found shift for that program, so that's why we chose to fund that last year. But, yeah. Yeah.
This is funding a person based in Wellington.
Okay, so we made a call, we're happy to stick with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
A request for you to make small business development finance.
No.
No, because
Not council, all business.
Put it in bank.
I would love to see that become a function of our economic development or
They go Carterton, then become bank, develop small businesses.
Helen Dew and her dollar or her card,
and
yeah.
economies.
It's just not council business.
it's also not consistent with your investment plans.
No, exactly.
Age concern, Helen asked you guys to partner with age concern to deliver programs. What's our relationship at the moment?
Lisa's got a really good relationship with Age Concern through the qualification strategy. But that's pretty much about it. We don't fund them currently.
We've supported them and we have supported them through grants in the past. I mean, last time, I think the time before they had their expo, we gave them the event centre for free hire, so we do support them on a small basis. I think what Nick was really alluding to was increasing that capacity and particularly Lisa's role to do more in that space towards, so that would be the partnership, is actually the coordinator having the, I guess, more hours, the ability to be able to work with them in leading or achieving the goals in our strategy. So the coordination role is only on till December this year, and it's 20 hours over 3 councils. So it's pretty.
Have we not made provision for that to carry on beyond December in this current LTP?
We've included our part in our personnel budgeting, so that's 30 to 20 hours, so it's a very small piece. So it's not really enough to devote actual FTE almost component to it, because it's hardly worth it. Yeah, there's no provision for actual resources or extra stuff outside those hours that we've committed. So we've committed for Lisa to December to finish our implementation plan, so that first plan that we had a whole lot of, and as Nick said yesterday, it was internal, a lot of it, so it's actually what the council are doing in terms of positive ageing. It's not too much in the outside community.
We really just continue doing what we're doing.
Yes, and certainly with the town centre, the development, what we're doing is we're very conscious of working or facilitating our older population, and also working with digital seniors on how we can make it user friendly for digital technology, also with our seniors. So something we're aware of there. Yeah.
There are lots of organisations in the community who are doing this stuff. We don't need to take over or bring it in-house. We just need to have the likes of Lisa, have that connectivity so that we can keep finger on the pulse.
And also when we make decisions, back to our strategy as well. We adopted the positive aging strategy.
So did you want to commit to that role?
When you say that role, what do you mean?
With Lisa's role?
Well, I feel like there needs to be some sort of conversation around that, because if we're just going to discontinue it, what's the rationale for that?
We need to understand what the follow-on activity is. So the implementation is kind of this amount. What then is the maintenance of that activity? It might not be 20 hours, it might be more.
You've got the commitment around things like community development and youth development, and whether you consider that development for older persons, so that becomes a portfolio within our community services team, for example, and the community development, whether you feel that long term that is going to require support, and with our numbers increasing, I see.
I'm just happy to be guided by management on what they think is an appropriate level to continue. Because I really value the work that Lisa's been doing, and I really value what the strategy is intending to achieve. So I would like to see that properly resourced.
I want to just focus on connecting with others, working in that environment, so we get shared outcomes.
So does that mean we're increasing it, or carrying on what we're doing at the same level, or what?
Maintain it.
Maintain the same.
Yeah, well, what Jerry just said, that there's no funding beyond December for that role.
So you can make a decision now to continue that role, to commit to the role. So
Yeah.
it's only a fixed term role, so we could make it a permanent role, permanent part-time.
So it's not shown in the long-term plan for up to December? Yes,
but it's not so much about the money, because it's quite a small portion of a small role. It's more the, do you want to commit to it in terms of it being something I think to you as a permanent.
Well, so the question is, do we see value in it, or do we want to keep going what we're doing?
Yes. But it's kind of up to staff how they best see that fitting in. Ideally, it would be someone's job permanently within community development, in my opinion. But I'm not the expert in that.
Yeah, so if you just commit to the continuation of the role as a permanent feature, then we'll work out how we accommodate that.
But once the strategy is implemented and its contents become business as usual, what are the leave behind things that were implemented that require maintenance over and above the business as usual bits? That's you know, is there a residual role required after implementation is completed, or are we saying we want to keep that person on to do something new, to keep developing in this space? And if we do, what is that new thing? You know, what is that extra bit? I don't want to be keeping someone on just for the sake of keeping someone on.
Yeah.
It has to be for a purpose.
So one of the things that Nick highlighted that would be really useful is that older person's hub or network. So it's often a difficulty, particularly working across 3 councils, is finding the person or the entity that takes ownership of that. And networks as such always require a driver or a coordinator or someone to bring those together, which is always quite a challenge. For Age Concern, for example, they are they've got their own services and programs that they're delivering that sit within that frame, but they don't think, they're working with or partnering with outside organisations. So there's a number of organisations. Often the challenge is that they work not in silos, but they're doing their own day-to-day business. Often they're only funded through central government for specific programs or business, rather than that interconnecting. When we did the engagement and the research behind the strategy, this older person's network or hub concept was highlighted then, and we felt that actually at the moment for us we were just going to focus on council activities and what we could be doing internally, making sure our policies reflect positive ageing initiatives, that kind of thing. The ongoing maintenance, I'm suggesting that in our implementation plan we're not going to get to everything that we wanted to tick off in that strategy for a start. And a lot of it is around parks and spaces, transport, housing, some of those bigger issues that do flow into this older person's, some of the issues that they're facing. That's not what we'll be looking at in this implementation plan. Those are sitting, but having someone as a link with councils, because we have a role to play in that, in terms of advocacy, those kind of things, advocating for medical services.
I'm convinced, sorry to cut you off, but that there's more to be done, and there's that hub thing. I think there's more than enough justification to keep her on in the same capacity.
So it helps, the other 2 councils have included it in their long-term plan to continue supporting work in this area.
Okay, so we comfortable to carry on? You were not in favour of carry on? Okay. Carry on. Thank you.
Bypass.
Start tomorrow, mate.
Sure.
So, right, how many 100 million? Russell? Doesn't matter, just do it.
Again, it's out of our hands. We might be able to influence it, but we'll never get around to doing anything with it until NZ or Whakatahi start thinking about it, and they won't even start thinking about it for 20 years. So thanks very much.
So yeah, because I agree, it's totally unaffordable, and I can't see what funding it. But you see it all the time, where towns grow and areas get built up, and the areas available for a bypass just get less and less and less, and further and further out. So is there a process that we can have to identify a path for a bypass that we're able to have designated for a bypass, so you don't go and build something in the middle of it or something like that, you know, I mean.
I asked the question, and the designating authority is Waka Kotahi. We can't push them to do that. So we can't decide in our long-term, in our district plan to designate the land, because Waka Kotahi will come along later and say, oh, we don't agree, we're going to designate this bit over here. It's meaningless us doing it.
And Waka Kotahi will not do it at the moment, because once you've designated land, then they're obliged to buy the land if asked to.
There's other options that we could look at within a few years of easing some of the congestion issues through the centre of town, short term, which would help over the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 60, 80 million years until someone decides to put a bypass in. So, yeah, a bypass, everyone thinks it's easy, simple, can be done, but it just won't happen.
I guess.
You can't get speed limits changed or reviewed or done within 20 years, let alone frickin' anything like that from brand new.
So could one of the things, I mean, absolutely can't do it, and Waka Kotahi won't look at, I mean, for us and in the Wairarapa, we feel that the traffic, and especially through the town centre, is huge, but the actual thousands of cars or trucks that go through each day are like nothing compared to hundreds of thousands of vehicle movements that the Waka Kotahi will probably be looking at in other areas. But could we somehow, I don't know how it would work, advocate for local truck drivers and transport companies to start using kind of a different route? We can't do.
Well, it takes them longer, it takes them further. They're not interested. State highways, what? And we don't really want to do that, because then it's going to wreck our roads. We want them on the state highway, because that's what gets paid for.
Okay.
And I think we have internet again, folks.
Oh, all right.
Ignore that idea then. I was trying to think outside the square.
So
I think one of the problems being exacerbated by the fact that the 102 gorge developments another couple of years away, probably at least on the Saddle Road, I think that will alleviate a lot of the through heavy traffic from Wellington to Hawke's Bay. And the other thing I think that will have another bearing, so what I'm saying is there's going to be less heavy truck movements down our state highway. And the other thing I think that will help it is when they get the double tracking in on the rail, and more logs are going by rail, because at the moment they're restricted by the amount of trains that they can run between here and Wellington every day, and they're at max now. So there's two things there that will help in the next 3 or 4 years, but until that happens, I think we're stuck with what we've got. The risk of getting built out further, we've probably got two options out this on the eastern side, the Marshall Road, and then more likely the Para Road, Bristol Road one. And I don't think we're going to have a problem for quite a few years until the town gets out that far. So I think
those roads aren't suitable for big heavy traffic. Volumes of it.
They could be.
It could be.
I mean, they're running a lot of traffic up now, especially Bristol Road, and Para Road runs a lot of big trucks up there.
I think when a bypass ever gets envisioned, there will be a whole bypass of Greytown, Carterton, and Masterton, and it'll join all up. I mean, it'll be a whole total new revamp of the road through the Wairarapa to do whatever it has to do. So.
Yeah, and I know some people are dismissive of it, but I think technology is going to play a big part. A lot of people won't have car ownership. You'll have an app. They won't have it in the Wairarapa like all other places as quickly. But yeah, we just got to be clever in the town centre how we work through that, and that's where the most of the gripe is. And it's the dirt and the filth that comes off everything, and it's the noise, and it's just.
Jane, if I hear it correctly, yesterday you said we are responsible for parking on the main street. So we can control parking on the main street. Thank you.
Well, it's a process.
We've got to ask.
Yeah, but we have some control over it. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have parking as a discussion. Okay, so bypass we've acknowledged.
Bypass.
Quality of footpaths, address the footpath weeds. So this is basically a request to put more funding into the footpath project. And maybe the virtual footpath project, both in terms of weed control and improving quality.
I think we addressed both of those going through the process of long-term plan. I'm comfortable where we landed there. I don't know. Do you want to deviate from that?
Did you bring those figures by any chance, Dave? Or we
It's just come back on, so.
Poor excuse, Dave.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't on last night either. I tried. I haven't got them. In terms of the footpath grading,
Oh, just specifically the Pembroke Street one from Carterton into town.
yeah, I just can't remember
Will that
there
be
was sections of the road, I'm pretty sure it's Pembroke. I'll see if I can.
Okay.
I've actually probably call that one.
Because I don't think we need to change our footpath
with how it
budget.
is,
We just
yeah.
may need to be a little bit more strategic about which sections get done first. And I think like Pembroke Street is one of those.
We have a policy on that, don't we? I mean, yeah.
And you've got a program.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly sure Pembroke Street's very high on the list. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of knowing when it's going
Okay, is everyone comfortable? Yep. Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
I do have it there.
Just like putting it.
Yeah, next.
No, I want to know this.
No, but you want to be out by 5.
Oh, that's alright.
Yes, yeah, less
So there was
conversation.
Victoria Street, so that had, was high on the red seal list. It's Pembroke.
Sure, Pembroke got done.
It may have already been done, the section of Pembroke Street.
It's
And it is,
On one side, yeah. One side they did do, I think,
Yep,
from
it's-
memory.
Okay, this is probably a discussion for
Yeah.
another time. We're going to keep going. Thank you, Dave.
Steve wants to have a celebrate.
Extending road ceiling.
Is this the dust road issue? Or is that separate? I mean the gravel road issue?
Gravel roads.
The dust issue, dust roads?
So rural, gravel, dusty roads.
Okay, so we're going to go around the table on this one. Who wants to start?
So we're talking about extending ceiling of.
Yes, so we don't have at the moment, we don't have a program to gradually every year extend the ceiling.
So, to me, it's real simple. If people want it, it's a consultation item in the next annual plan or long-term plan, and we put a figure against it, say if you want it, it's going to cost X amount of dollars, yes or no, and I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money.
So how will we differentiate between which roads to do?
Well, that's one of the
We'll just-
criteria and stuff.
just set it.
Yeah.
So we've got to have a criteria.
Yeah.
That we've got, or if we haven't got one, we've got to have it. If we have got one, well, we've got to have a look at it.
Do you want to do that?
It'd be property, it'd have to be traffic movements.
But also,
Yeah.
the development that's gone on the end of Hauriki Road, the development contributions to sections up there, does that have to be spent?
No,
Or that goes into the general slush fund?
because
It's
they're
not a
financial,
slush fund. It's
because
not a
they're
slush
financial
fund.
contributions, they go into the general fund, yes.
General rate.
Yeah.
Well, the infrastructure contributions that goes into infrastructure.
So we need a criteria, don't we, if we're going to?
Yeah.
I, at the risk of making work for us, after the consultations yesterday, I went home and I looked into the stuff that was talked about, the inhaling dust particles and stuff, found that Far North District Council and Northland Regional Council, together with the Ministry of Health, have actually done a study on gravel roads and dust and the health effects, the health impacts. They found, and this is all in the context of the National Environmental Standard for Air Quality and whether or not dusty roads exceed the criteria set in there, they came up with, the number is actually quite low, 40 trucks on a day that it doesn't rain is enough as the sort of threshold, any more than 40 trucks, and then you run into the issues of exceeding. And on their particular road, which they monitored for an entire year, there were 27 days on which the dust was too much. The standard only allows for 1 day. What I would propose for this, so this to me, their conclusion was that yes, there is a risk to public health from dusty roads. It is based on traffic volumes and stuff, but it sort of seemed to me, well, actually we've had something raised, a little bit of scratching the surface, and it has been identified as a health risk. I think we need to put it to the officers to go to the likes of Far Northwood District Council, find out what more, the suggestion here is that there needs to be more study to see if it's just this road, if it's other roads, etc.
Does that dust affect on people living on the road, like literally living on the road, or?
No, so they monitored the dust, and they've got conclusions around 30 metres off and 60 metres off the road. They talk about, yeah, but it's about imagine somebody walking along the road to the bus stop and a truck goes past and the dust that they're exposed to. But basically the fag packet sums were, we've got 160 kilometres of unsealed road at 400k per kilometre, that's $63 million worth of sealing if we did the whole lot. If we were to treat it according to what the Borlace Road proposal was, which was 10k per road, it'd be $1.5 million every year. I think we just need to put some numbers around this stuff, and then for the next annual plan put it to the community and say, do we want a 20-year sealing program to seal everything? Or
So
do we want to adopt?
plan,
Yeah, but I think we can do some, I think there's enough evidence there that we do, I think we're obliged to look into it deeper.
I suggested that if the evidence was that convincing, Oka Kotahi and the Ministry of Health would be leading a national program.
This is very recent. This is 2020, this particular report, and they're saying they need to do more roads to see if this is wider. I think we need to engage with this to see if it's something we need to do. But,
Okay.
sorry, that's...
We've also got to look where the submissions came from. It was one road in the whole of the district.
Was two.
They
No,
did
it's-
Oh, that was
public forum.
But effectively, this particular standard, which came in 2004 and is just finished, it's just come out of consultation again now, like April. It exists, it's part of the RMA. If someone was to come at us and say, what are you doing about this? You're failing to, address something which exceeds, if it's our road, and what's our exposure to risk there? No?
So it's even council in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you want to be a leader in this?
No.
Or are you happy just to?
Because the other issue is, we've got a lot of unsealed roads with lots of people on it, and you've got some roads that are access roads, dead end roads. It's I like what Russell said.
3.
Anyway, sorry,
$63 million.
it's the fact finder in me. But
To me, it comes down to what's on that road, how long that road is, and like was mentioned yesterday by John Keating, how many houses are on that road, new subdivision.
Density of housing.
Yeah, this has got to be in what we look at in our criteria or whatever that's in, for when we decide when does it go to the next level of needing tar sealing.
So we should need to identify criteria that would be a trigger.
Yeah.
Is that part of the policy that we agreed to develop for infrastructure and services?
It was dust suppression.
that's appreciated.
Maybe it's one place we need to consider a targeted rate, if it's.
Well, so the Infrastructure and Services Committee, you've asked officers to do some work on a dust suppression policy.
But if they want,
Could include seeking targeted rates to fund it or landowner contribution.
it may be extended, but the sealing, if people that have bought on unsealed roads and now want the roads sealed, it could be an opportunity for a targeted rate to help repay some of it. Especially a dead end unsealed road which gets used by the residents only who say, well, I'm just throwing stuff out there. At 400 grand a K.
When was the last road?
Sealed in Carterton.
They've done, actually, when we were at a flat point, you noticed there were the hill sections there done.
Yeah.
I think that could have been the last.
That wasn't done for dust suppression though, that was
Yeah,
done
it's
to
the
minimise the cost of maintaining the
Yes,
road.
yes, but it was a
But
gravel
it's
road
still
dust, yeah.
sealing.
And I think Tiffin Road, that was done, that was part of the subdivision on the hill there, the road had to be widened and that would have to be sealed. That was,
Paid
that
by
went through the
the
consent process and that was an outcome
Yeah,
from
it's paid
that
by the
consent
development
process.
agreement.
So South Wairarapa did, I don't know if it still has, had a policy of 1 kilometre of sealing every year.
Yeah, they're consulting on dropping it, so it's done now.
Personally, I think it would be good for us to go through that criteria process and actually maybe adopt it as an official policy. However, that would, I would conditionally support that if we had a targeted rate for roading across our district, that everyone pays the same into that pot of money. And that could be either based on land value or capital value. I know Central Hawke's Bay District Council, they have a what they call a land transport rate, and that is across their district and it's based on land value because their rationale is that larger land holdings, titles generate more traffic. That's their assumption. So it might be worth having a look at that.
Are you talking urban too as well, or just rural?
No, across the board. So currently, urban, for every dollar of capital value, urban pays $1, rural pays 80 cents per dollar of capital value going into our roading pot. So if we're going to be increasing our level of service, which will be predominantly in the rural district, it is only fair that we are all contributing the same to that. And I will not support any level of service increase unless that happens.
You've got to be careful how you characterise the criteria.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be on 1,000 square metres with 2 cars, and I'm on 2,700 square metres with 2 cars. You know, you can't argue that I drive more on the roads than you drive on the roads.
I agree, but you can't argue that rural use roads less than
So
urban.
scale it up, you know, a farmer with, 20 hectares, that's a small farm. You know, he might have a couple of workers and, the family. That's an awful lot of square metres for not very many vehicles on the road.
I'm not suggesting that we necessarily take the land value, I'm just saying that's an example of how another council's done it. I think currently we cannot justify having that lower rate for roading for rural, and especially if we're looking at increasing that level of service.
Why would you include urban in that?
I'm not including urban, I'm just saying that we need to bring rural up to the same level that urban is.
But if everyone put the same amount on, are you talking just rural or urban plus rural? So
Yeah,
It's not
urban.
talking
Urban's
the same.
already $1, and I think what Rebecca's saying,
A
and
flat rate across
rural
the
is
district.
0.8 to bring.
Oh.
So what's the
rural
land
up to
value?
one.
What does the
are you
land
talking
value
about
come into if it's a flat
changing the
rate?
differential?
Yeah.
Well, it's taking the roading out of that differential.
So at the moment, roads are paid for, not disregarding subsidies, on the general rate, and on the general rate there is the differential. So what Rebecca's saying, take it out of general rates and call it a targeted rate.
And you can base that on whatever you want, as long as it is the same across urban and rural. Same proportion. But that's a discussion to be part of this discussion.
Okay.
In rural, one
From me, we need to work out a criteria and a trigger, and the trigger for sealing or other work is for health reasons, safety reasons, or even volume reasons, so we just need a criteria and then a trigger.
So safety reasons will be really hard because they'll be the same everywhere.
Yeah.
A gravel road is a gravel road, it's a gravel road.
Yeah.
Well, India's now with steep precipitous
Yeah.
would be the only exception. South Wye are dealing with that at the moment. Some of the gravel roads are dangerous.
Oh, yeah, safety would be first.
Well, I suppose health would be a preference, isn't it? Because that's where
Although safety statistically, so gravel roads statistically are safer than said roads.
Because people generally drive it slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the speed thing is the major
So they would traffic calm and leisure gravel roads.
Okay, we need to make a call on this.
Yeah.
So where have we landed?
I get the criteria sorted out
Get
first.
criteria first.
Well, do we want to do some work on it, or do we just want to say thanks very much?
I'm not sure, but we would need to make it more detailed anyway. I haven't come across anything other than a judgment call. It would have, do something on a per kilometre per resident in traffic count basis. You don't want to commit to X number of vehicles triggering a ceiling and have the longest unsealed road triggering that, and then you're up for
So
million plus.
why can't we go on there straight away and lower the speed limit?
We
There's
can.
no-
The posted speed limit and the speed limit and the OV are not the same thing. Yeah, do, but people are not travelling at 100 kilometres an hour.
But then it does apply to their personal liability on the slips. That's on them, that's not on us.
Yeah, and that is a small community, they'll all know each other's other thing, I think, their cars that travel up and down the road.
And then they have, you know, the speed limit, it's get a video of the number plate
Yeah.
and then chuck it into the
Yeah.
police and it's a police matter.
Well, when we
Not a
had that
council
near
matter.
miss a couple of weeks ago, apparently Ron was saying that the drivers were really good, they RT'd everyone and said, hey look, we just about had a near miss and could you travel slower, apparently, so the trucks slowed down.
Should we just agree to do some more investigation into this? And whether that's developing a policy, well, I think do the pre-work and to see if we need to develop a policy.
Well, I'd say let's just ask the officers to investigate the policy we already have and come back to us with a bit of information.
It's come to us through Paulace Road and then Hoagie Road. It's come to us too late to really do due diligence for this LTP, but we can commit to looking into it further.
I agree. I wouldn't suggest
Yeah.
adjusting the budgets for this LTP.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So policy and that will go back to infrastructure and services.
I think it needs to be a policy. It's a full council policy decision.
Policy and strategy.
That would be my preference.
Is that time with the dust suppression that INS have asked for though? No?
Okay, next one, Joe.
Bridge funding, so I think there's,
There's a couple weren't there.
yeah, so we don't have enough money for bridge replacements. But we've got bridge replacements in our program.
So we've took the bridge age is just one condition, one criteria for looking at asset management of the bridges. So we've got, every 3 years we have the bridges assessed by engineers and we take our cue off the bridge condition. So it's, the age is just one trigger. So we know that we're all getting older, but we do have a process around engineers checking those bridges every 3 years, part of our Whakakotahi funding requirements. We have discussed this from our next part of our asset management plan, and our infrastructure strategy in roading will be probably in the next 20 years, once we do it. So the next infrastructure strategy review, which will come to the next LTP in time with Whakakotahi's funding, will start to put on bridge replacement probably in the next 20 years of the most critical ones from there. So we are looking at it, the next round of this on this current round of funding, we have asked the engineers to actually start assessing of what's going to be of a best guess of end of life on the bridges. But we're not in any immediate danger of the bridges, right? And we are constantly monitored, but we will be. It's enough to signal to start the next infrastructure strategy. But it will be in the 20-year mark of the next infrastructure strategy, so we're 23 years away from having the first bridge in there, bridge replacement.
Are we currently funding depreciation on those
Yeah,
assets?
no. These bridges are probably getting 80, 90 years old, never funded, so it's a little bit late.
So they'll be loan funded.
Might not be ours then.
I think another aspect of that comment brought to us while that submitted was the safety factor.
how, I guess it's affected over the last 15, 20 years, the vehicles that are travelling often have got more and bigger, and some of those bridges are quite daunting to have two trucks passing by or a car and a truck passing over. So I guess the options we've got around us are whether we want to consider changing any of the ways the bridges operate, whether they become, instead of two-lane bridges, one-lane bridges, from a safety perspective.
Some of that farm equipment is huge now, way oversized, and it uses our road, they use our roads too.
I mean, a couple of bring-ups on the Carterton Bridge, where you've had cars and trucks trying to get across to get them, and just don't fit. So I think that a review of, well, I don't know, consideration of whether we should do something along those lines, or look at the safety side of that. Seeing it's going to be another 20 odd years before we get any improved bridges over those rivers, might be worth considering.
It's probably real basic stuff, but if so say a stock truck hits the side of the bridge and damages it severely, does insurance cover that?
We insure, don't know if we insure our bridges.
Or can we claim on insurance off the truck company?
If they're insured sufficiently.
They would fix it though, they wouldn't replace your bridge.
Yeah, I know, but
Okay, so we'll add a little action, which is reviewing the operation of the sort of narrow bridges, regarding signage and other control.
Yeah. Bring it back to.
okay, thank you.
I'm just thinking though, should we be funding depreciation for that?
Well,
I know it would be fully loan funded, but that's going to be a massive loan, and if we've only...
Well, if we've only got 20 more years, you're not going to collect very much on depreciation funds.
You can get funding, can't you?
Well, it will be co-funded.
Yeah, but
by the
50
NTA.
something percent, even still, I don't know how much a bridge of that is going to cost.
It's millions.
No, I know Marston are just doing your bridge on the road, and that was quite a process to get it included in the land transport plan.
If you think about like just the wastewater treatment plant, the impact that loan had on people's rates, that could be a very large cost for our ratepayers. I don't know if that's something that we should be saving up for.
So hit the ratepayers now rather than in the future.
No.
Because
No, we can't do
will
that.
pay the depreciation.
Yeah, I guess what's our responsibilities about around being prudent?
If you're going to
That's
depreciate
situation.
an asset, you've basically got to start doing it from its,
Yeah.
to be fair on the whole life of it, you've got to do it from its, either from once it's paid off or at the beginning of its lifespan. Otherwise, if you start depreciating at the last 20 years of its lifespan, it's not really fair on the people that do that. Depreciation's a sucky thing, but you can't really start depreciating something 3/4 of its way for its life or end of life. It's not fair on the people that are paying for it.
I'm just worrying, I'm not worried that we're going to push the couple amount to somebody else.
Okay.
But it's, we can't be dealing with a 20-year.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, if we decided to say make that a one-way bridge, that bridge might last another 50 years.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So it's not just replacing the bridge isn't the only option. There are lots of different ways to manage that piece of
And
road.
I like the
make it safe.
idea of looking at that option.
Short term, we probably should look at this kind, I don't know, but the signage on either ends of the bridge, I can't remember what's on there, but perhaps we could have a look at the upgrading of that and improve safety and Steve
You need lights, not necessarily.
You
You can see
No,
it.
you can see what I mean.
No, if you make it
It's a
one way.
big dip to get up on that hill from the west, and then you got the big corner that's really close to it.
Anyway,
Yeah, so we're going to review and consider the safety of the bridges.
Okay, forestry rates to fund road maintenance.
We asked the question of Fed Farmers, are you aware of any other districts that
Yeah.
have a lever to pull? And she's like, no.
Yes,
I think-
they said
Higher
fire
up.
rise, Kaipara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were the two ones that we
But
looked
they
at.
were where they had forestry within the district.
Yeah.
So my
Oh,
question
yeah,
was
that's
around,
right.
Oh,
transiting through, and the answer is
Yeah.
no, we don't have anything.
We haven't got any levers for that.
Or we have the forestry that's within our district.
Only forestry within the
From your
district.
perspective, what about that?
well, didn't we look at this last year? And we
Certainly.
decided that
We did talk about it. I don't think there's much forestry within our district, is there?
No, there's not,
But-
it's not that it's not due for harvest or something.
So the stuff that was being harvested on the 2 Wardour Road, what's that road called? Kingston,
Yeah, okay, so there's an example at the moment, Craigie Lee Road, it's being harvested and there's, and we're experiencing residents on there at the moment that are addressing issues, aren't we, Dave? Yeah,
A resident
that's right.
is trying to preempt what may come, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a national policy statement on forestry that makes it permitted activity, and there's not much we can do outside of that, so there's no resource consent controlling over it. It's just sits in there as a national policy statement under the RMA. If it's overseas investment, the Overseas Investment Office, which was happening in Craigie Lee Road, and the forestry owners do pay a contribution to the road, and they pay $200,000 to the Craigie Lee Road, upgrading some of the corner work on that road. $200,000 doesn't go far in roading, but there's limited, so we just have to take a watching brief on what's ready for harvest and be ready to repair the road once the harvesting is. You probably can't wait till the full harvest is finished because it can take quite some time, so we just have to watch the roads as they are being harvested and repair where it's prudent to do so, mainly on a safety basis.
So no change.
No change?
No change.
No change, but could we make that research public in some way? To show that we actually have gone through it and we have had those discussions?
Okay, thank you, yeah, good point.
Okay, High Street appearance. So this is the residential part of High Street. And the suggestion that you provide some sort of incentives for High Street residential property owners to touch up their properties.
No.
Oh, no way.
No, because
We don't have any influence on other people's personal.
The only
incentives rather than making them.
Yeah, the only influence we've got over high street properties is overgrown trees on footpaths. And there is quite a few hedges that need trimming back.
It
And
makes
I
it,
know Clinton has been onto it, hasn't
A heap of it's been done.
he? Yeah.
it makes no sense to take money off someone in Belvedere Road to give it to someone on High Street
No.
to say, turn up your property.
No, it's just a matter of informing the residents of the overhanging trees or the nuisance, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Water tanks.
District plan.
Maybe why don't we get this Wiley report a little bit sort of easier for everyone to actually understand? I mean, there's a real point in getting people to put a few small tanks in, for a few $100 and collect some water when it's available. That's what we're doing. And we're doing a new build. We're not investing thousands of dollars into some huge tank system. Okay. The water's so cheap. What is it? $1.40 now? Is it per cubic metre?
Something like that, yeah.
I checked and we've used 23 cubic metres in 6 months. So easy as 140 litres a day, something like that. So I mean, no, you don't need much water.
The water tank thing, I mean, we've been talking about it for years, but it's part of climate change as well, it's part of the environment. Could we sort of make, we want to make climate change a bit more visible in the district? Is that something maybe we could incorporate, encouraging through the climate change stuff?
I suggest that water tanks could actually help to greenhouse gas emissions. So when you have a water tank, you're probably going to have a pump.
Yep.
And pumps use power. So at the moment we reticulate and it's already there and most of it's sort of gravity and sort of pretty low CO2. You probably, if you're going to add that many pumps, then you're actually going to
Increase.
get a negative impact on.
you've got to get rid of the tanks at their end of life, it's another landfill ship for plastic. So, I mean, people can basically have gravity fed types as long as they put their tanks on a stand.
We've got ours up on breeze blocks.
That's right, yeah.
That's
And
not
then
really the size, it's
No.
going to make that much difference, is it, for that?
but it is for irrigation. It's fine.
But also for emergency.
Yep.
So just on water tanks on new builds, and through a district plan process, has there been discussion there?
Not yet. But the problem around doing that is, like, from us as a territorial authority, it's all about doing things at scale to do it cheaper,
Yes,
effectively,
right.
and a higher quality. Doing it distributed through tanks everywhere is kind of the opposite of that. And then it comes down to, so A, why are you going to do it? B, who should pay for it? And C, what, if you're going to make it a rule, what does the rule say? Is it just a tank to collect rainwater to water the garden? Is it a tank that has to be pumped and plumbed into the grey water system, or a tank, you know, for toilets and stuff? Or does it have to be a full grey water reuse where it's capturing stuff and then filtering it and then putting it back in? There's lots of questions around what you would mandate. And then if you're going to mandate it, it's like, well, how far do you go? Do you make people retrofit them as well?
No.
You know.
Well, not if you're supplying a community supply.
Exactly. So I mean, my feeling is that it's like climate change. We have to lead by example, and I think putting the tanks in down at Dalton Farm is a really good example. We're doing it at scale to achieve the same sorts of things that you would do if you're putting tanks in a home. This is why, you know, and maybe we could partner with the tank guy to invite him into market to our people. I don't think we should put ratepayer money to it, but I think we should encourage people to make the decision themselves, as Jill's done and Robin have done, and actually put what suits them for their circumstances.
There's a huge advantage in, like you say, Jill, it will have the end result as a faction, you know, that outlines those in a simple process, you know, of reasoning.
I mean, the nice thing is that we've got these two, I don't know, it'd be 300, I think it'd be 300 cubic litres, I think, anyway. And that does our watering, our pots and all, everything we need outside. Oh, it's a lot of water.
The big gotcha.
Is quite a lot of water.
The big gotcha yesterday was that guy saying wanted to water his lawn and keep it green 365 days a year. And you see a lot of that on social media. The message from us is to say that's not what a town supply water is intended for. You know, you're lucky that we don't have that restricted most of the time. You know, some towns do.
His section, his little lawn is quite small. It's like a pocket handkerchief.
But regardless, there are lots of people. There are lots of people who deny the climate effects and think that I turn my tap on, water should flow as much as I want, whenever I want, and it's not true.
Well, when we first moved here, and we asked one of our neighbours, do you have water restrictions? So it's coming into summer, and when we were renting, and she looked at us like we were mad and said, "Oh no, we don't have water restrictions. I turn my tap on, and there's water all the time." And she had no idea what we meant by water restrictions. That was, 11 years ago.
Okay, so we're in agreement there?
Yeah. Can I just say, possibly once the district plan committee is a bit further down the track, it might pay for us to make some official recommendations to the committee from the council, and then we could have that discussion around should new builds have these or not. Personally, I think they should have a tank for outdoor use at a bare minimum. And then for the rest, maybe we could just join in with the South Wairarapa promotional type program. I don't know if they actually put dollars to it, or there's some sort of...
They applied to the shovel ready PGF or something, and I think they didn't get it, but a lot of this publicity had already happened, and so the tank guy came on board anyway. I think.
But that might just be enough for some people, you know, something like that.
So just clarifying the action there, so do you want to ask the review committee to consider tanks, the district plan review committee to consider tanks coming out of this process, or do you want to direct them?
I would like to have that conversation about whether or not we should recommend them.
Okay, so one of the things that the So one of the things that the review committee will have to do is do a cost benefit analysis of any new provisions, which will include this if they put it in. So they may or may not reach the appropriate threshold. So I think in terms of directing them or asking them, now is probably better to do it rather than once they've gone through the process themselves. So you could express a clear view that you would like it or not.
One of the other reasons around water tanks, and they've gone specifically for new builds, but retrospective, was also resilience. So for a major disaster, water lines rupturing, etc., etc. So that was also part of the submissions. So council, you can buy however many 200 litre tanks or whatever for $115. Yeah. As an emergency plan, as Jill's just said, a couple of hundred litres lasts a while.
Ours are always full.
Just to be honest, I think Rob summed it up very well. Very good opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just on collective supply and also we're talking about affordable housing in our district too. Yeah.
Now, that Wiley report, I got the feeling that maybe Capity wasn't that successful.
No, it wasn't.
It's not. It hasn't really worked. I understand.
Well, I think it's worked for the people that took it up, but the number of people that took it up was so small that it had negligible impact on the district.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
nothing in it said that it didn't work, just that it didn't work on a small scale.
No, what it was retrofitting. So you expect the number of retrofits to decline at a time. They have it compulsory for new builds, don't they? Yeah. So that makes sense to me, that over time your retrofits are going to decline. But anyway, so this is why I think we need to have a wider conversation about this and then decide what that recommendation to the district planning committee needs to be, because I don't think we have all the information in front of us. And we also don't know whether or not we should be recommending grey water or just outside outdoor use, or I don't think anyone of us would support tanks for potable water. But
I would go further and say this should really be a national directive. We're not going to go to them and say, having your individual solar so you could, be disconnected from the network would be useful as well. Having a compostable toilet to use if the sewage system fails, well, that would be useful in an emergency. Having triple glazing or whatever, there's lots of things that would be useful, but it's not for us to tell the individual property owners, you should do this. We can explain to them all of the benefits of doing so, the convenience of being able to water your lawns 365 days a year, but it's up to them whether they take it up and invest in that convenience, and invest in that resilience.
And on your point about that double glazing or triple glazing, isn't that now a national standard?
Yes.
Yeah, on new, but it's not a national standard on new builds.
You don't have to have double glazing on a house.
No.
Oh, okay.
As long as you cover that with other, so the size of your wall or
There's a
whatever.
thermal requirement on your build, and so if you have big large windows, there's a thermal calculation that you can't allow too much escape of heat or entry of heat. So if you have tiny little windows, that'll meet that calculation. It doesn't do it any other way you like. You could have a whole room full of glass, but to make that calculation, you have to make it double glazed.
Okay, so it's a thermal calculation.
Thermal
Okay,
calculation.
so do you want to have a session on this rather than trying to get back to you now? Yep. Okay.
We need the information so that we can tell the story, because people are asking for it for lots of different reasons, and we need everyone on the same sheet of music.
I think it would just be nice to have a resolution to this issue, like a proper resolution.
Up to 20 odd years, it would be.
That's Jill's outcome.
Do you think we're going to get that?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to stop at 3 o'clock for 10 minutes.
Okay, so related to that is somebody just mentioned, the level of service for our water supply. I deliver a level of service, I'll provide a level of service that means people aren't restricted in the summer.
So I can water my lawn.
Yeah. I think we just need to see what everyone else in the rest of the world is doing, and they all have water restrictions, and actually some of them 365 days a year.
I think it's part of our response to climate change and climate mitigation. We can't treat water as an endless resource. We've got to respect it.
When you look at your energy now, your power that you get, no energy company's going to say they're going to guarantee you 24-hour, 7-day-a-week power supply.
Yeah.
It's true, we can't.
And you need the internet access as well, it's experienced.
Okay, so,
Been out for basically 24 hours.
yeah. And we survive.
Yeah, of course we do, and we're still here.
Yeah, they say that one's sorted.
But what does that actually mean? What are we going to do about that? Is it changing our comms or changing the wording in the LTP or is it just?
No,
Well, I think it
we're
was just
accepting
the-
water restrictions, end of story.
Okay.
We'll have them, like every other place
Yeah.
in the world.
And even, dare I say it, even if they weren't strictly necessary, they might be advisable for the benefit of the environment. You know, why would you abstract all this extra water out of the river when it might be better to leave it in the river so it follows the, you know?
And maybe we should just be promoting water conservation.
Yeah, because it can be
Yeah, I mean, we came off a rural supply and we've been in town 165 days, used 23.7 cubic meters. It's not me, it's my partner. Read the bloody thing. 143 litres a day is what we use.
Take her there.
And I do shower, Steve.
I wasn't going to talk about
But do you shower every day though?
Let's talk about flushing.
I'm not allowed to flush.
Okay, next one.
Let's go
So
very
there's
rural.
a suggestion that you look at charging, volumetric charging to maybe influence demand.
We had
Is
that
that
discussion,
We
we
need it.
had that
We've had
discussion.
it and
We decided against it.
No.
Surely it will come back in the water conservation strategy as a discussion point or not?
No, because we need a
No,
certain
it's
amount
like
of water. I'm quite happy to pay that, whatever it is nowadays, it's $700 for a water. Much prefer to pay council that than have to fiddle around with my own supply, the pump bloody breaks down in the middle of the night and don't have water, and you have to replace it, and, you know, all that shit. And, yeah, this is so easy.
Do you love being on
And
town? Do you
then-
love being on town supply,
Yeah, and
Jill?
then I think I only pay $1.40 for per cubic metre.
You love being on town supply?
Oh, it's great.
Jill will be our communications on.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
social housing, council collects. So there is a request for you guys to consider.
No.
No, Carter Court provides it.
And
Not
no,
even
because
No, because that wouldn't mean increasing burden on our ratepayers to actually purchase land for affordable housing.
We're not.
And increasing it, and social housing, sorry, and it would increase our debt levels exponentially.
It's not
well,
core
that would be a
business.
consequence, is that the reason that you're not doing it?
Yes.
It's not core
And the other
business for us.
thing was, one of the reasons we gave our, donated, obviously to a trust, is that people can actually get rent rebates
Yeah, that's
from
changed
this
now.
trust. It's completely changed now councils can do it. What
So Masterton's considering increasing its housing stock.
Why the frick did they? You know, it's
So
crazy,
but
eh?
we don't have any housing stock, so it's not, I wouldn't be in favour.
No.
I'm more focused on us being an enabler, to them being in the business around social housing, and we were, and it was perceived that was, it's not necessarily our core business, just like running a holiday camp wasn't either, you know, but
I think you can probably state in there as well that we're investigating other avenues to provide affordable housing or try to enable affordable housing.
the social housing.
That's social housing I've mentioned.
Yeah, I guess so.
The other thing, of course, is that as a trust, you can actually get grants for lots of different, so the Porritt Place flats, which really needed upgrading after the council had them for 40 or 50 years, you know, heat pumps are given by someone and then get funding for something else. It's a wonderful way.
Someone replaces the roof.
Yep, that's right.
Insulation.
Absolutely.
Okay, we
I
comfortable
think you
with
might find that the world's probably a little bit different now, and there is a lot of funding available that councils will access to assist them with their housing portfolios. But, I mean, your view is, it's not your core business, and you're an enabler and you rely on other providers. advertising
Yeah.
strategy.
And love garden very warm.
More horse riding facilities.
Well, I'm a horse rider and I think we've got plenty personally.
I agree.
What you'll see.
Plenty of
I mean,
parks.
honestly,
I mean, you can't
Yeah.
get much better than the Dalefield Road horse park at the
yeah,
moment.
there's heaps of places you can go.
When I had a horse at home, I used to ride it around the streets.
Oh, you can't nowadays, too busy.
I just ran back roads these days.
There's also opportunities on a lot of farms, and I know out in Carterton there, just have
Different
discussions with farmers, and quite often they allow horses
Yep.
to go on farms.
Yep.
Use their tracks.
Yep.
So that's.
Pay
that's
$10
good.
in a park enough thing. There's plenty of other opportunities. Obviously that person doesn't know what's available.
Mm.
More dog control services.
Was that the rural?
No, that's on the rural dog feeds.
Oh, there was a submission about lots of dogs roaming around unattended on the streets.
CBD, like town centre, is that what it was?
I think it just said
Um,
urban, there's unattended dogs around.
Oh,
I think Karen's doing an amazing
So there's a
job.
service request and it gets dealt with.
Is she overtasked?
We've got backup for her, so if it gets out of hand or whatever she's like, we've got backup.
Okay, so we don't need extra capacity to meet the current demand?
I don't think so. Dave, you're-
No, I don't think we need extra capacity, because we think about replacement at some point, you know, succession replacement, nothing, no backup right at the moment.
Okay. I think
Okay,
we'll
rural
do.
dog feeds. So this is Federated Farmers suggesting that it's a rural dogs. Really, that contribute to animal control responsibilities and what they do, don't they? So
Yeah, they do,
I think
actually,
Karen's
the
got-
rural dogs take a lot longer, so we do have the rural dogs that have lost it, and Karen's really good, she recognises it as being a working dog. They're expensive, they usually don't have any collars on because they're working dogs through fence and all the rest of it. And so she spends quite considerable time driving around up and down houses, which are usually unoccupied and have to come back several times to find out where the dog actually belongs. So a lost dog can take a lot more time than in a rural area than an urban area. It just does drag.
So I say we say no for the reasons they've just explained.
Yep.
So if you look at it, urban dogs already pay $95 compared to rural dogs. Your first 2 dogs get to be $70 and after that it's $36. So they already get quite a large discount.
They're only talking about removing the $36 for the remaining dogs. So
No.
we're still gonna,
No, they want,
No, they want the first dog to be
Flat
36.
flat fee.
Flat
The
fee.
first dog's 70, I think,
And-
for
yeah.
rural, and they want to drop both of them to 36.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So really, basically, it's only $36 per farm.
Well, no,
No,
because they
no,
have
no.
multiple dogs.
They want it to be $36 per dog.
Yeah, that's right. So there's only the one dog at 70 and the rest of the dogs are 36
No, they want all the dogs.
for $36.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
so the first,
First at 36,
So the first
second
dog-
36.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
yeah.
But that's only a saving
One.
of
$34.
$34 per farm.
Just leave it as it is for the
Yeah,
reasons
leave-
they've explained.
Yeah. Exactly.
What's an urban dog? No?
I don't know.
No,
$9.95. I just think
$20
it will
if
70
it's
if they've got space.
Okay, so the answer's no.
So I pay $210 a year for my 3 dogs.
It's actually really.
Upgrade transfer
Someone else put my hand
station, do more in the reuse, reclaim, recycle and do some food waste composting.
We sowed the seed in Helen New. We wait for her to come back. Because we talked about this kind of at the time, that it's not our business to establish a new business for reclaim, recycle stuff, but we would more than happily support, you know, in kind or however it would work out. You know, we're happy if someone decided to establish one within the district. The complicating factor is the fact that the waste management's done under contract. So that stream of stuff which goes into the transfer station, we can't give it away to someone else. It would have to be set up as a separate business.
I mean, when all this sort of came about with the resource recovery fees, it was about 15 years ago, and Gary Baker and I talked about to Vinnie's and to Salvation Army, and said, because everyone should go there, and then what they do is they take their stuff they can't sell on, take it to the transfer station for free. That seems to work.
Just need to publicise that.
Do they have the volunteers to process all the stuff that gets
Yes,
dropped
they
off?
do.
What was their rate of like unsuitable stuff? Were they getting?
Don't know, they're doing it now.
Oh, they're still doing it now.
Oh, yeah.
So we just need to publicise what's happening.
Well, they might not be so, we might have that conversation with them first.
That was the end of a rubbish dump of all of us.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I know that they get a huge amount of stuff that they have to go through, so it's stuff, to their
Yeah.
capacity if we did advertise it.
So maybe we just push those people on to the Vinnies and Salvation Army and say, go and talk to these people. You know,
I'll take anything.
And also if someone has a proposal, come and see us.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, we're supportive of the idea in principle, it's not different by town.
The other thing is these things often fall over.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, food waste collection.
Well, we consulted about that 3 years ago.
Mhm.
I don't know, I can't remember now what happened, but
The results were that we found, I think it was like 60% of Carterton did their own composting already.
There wasn't really the need for it, or there wasn't the call for it.
That's right, and talk to your neighbours, so they might want your compost.
Yeah.
I thought she mentioned outside.
They do it in the offices here, they have food waste bins which are composted. So it's all go to the pigs. So that might have been within.
I think Dave takes it.
So a question, we've got 10 more to go, do we want to stop for 10 minutes and do the last 10?
Keep going up.
Keep going.
Okay. Can I just need to go and make a phone call, sorry.
We've only got 10 more.
Well,
So we're not doing the other matters.
Oh, yeah.
Extend rubbish collection into the rural areas.
No,
No, use a pays basis.
user pays,
Is this
Pays.
contract, private contractors?
private
that will do that?
contractor.
Well, it's a safety thing too, isn't it? That you can't pick up a bin in a 100k area, is that correct? Or-
Well,
I know they do, don't they?
It was the recycling, and that was because they had to get off and hand sort it.
Oh, okay.
But the rubbish pickups, it's all full in the truck.
They do, yeah.
That request was specifically Norfolk Road, and I would suggest that we
Rural,
say-
they don't get rubbish delivery, they don't get it, they're rural.
No, but places like Anderson's Line, which are technically rural, do they get recycling and rubbish collection?
I remember last time we consulted on this, so that Lincoln Road, where it's half rural,
Yeah.
half urban, that there was an option for those rural users on that site to opt in, and they could have opted in if they chose to. I think they could still opt in, but there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
Steve, you might be able to, you would probably be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we opted in.
Yeah.
But, and so, in anywhere that the truck went, they didn't want to extend it to anywhere in the 100k zone for safety reasons.
Well, possibly that could be reviewed after the Steve review then. I mean, if people are willing to pay for the service and they live out in that area, well, why shouldn't they?
Well, they can get the service out there, they just pay for it,
Can they get recycling pick up too?
no,
Yeah, something like that.
because it's free.
They would all need to.
Yeah, they all need to do it.
They all have
They
to
don't need to
comply.
do it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the whole region.
Okay, on the, continuing the rubbish thing, free rubbish and green waste collection.
No, it's against waste minimisation policy.
I don't think it was about collection actually, I think it was about dropping off at the transfer station.
Same answer.
But,
Yeah, same answer.
Can't be free, otherwise there's no disincentive.
There's no such thing as free, no.
Mm.
Okay, but in the rates we pay for correct. Not enough focus on the rural parts of the district.
So that focus, just trying to remember, what was the focus about? Focus
Well,
on
it was that
activities
David
or?
Campbell, so that was kind of the, maybe the Hope Road issue, etc.
There was nothing specific.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, it wasn't.
Heat farmers.
No, I think
No,
it wasn't. It was,
I think it feels right.
Yeah.
or was it?
And I guess you do look at a lot of our activities, and they are obviously urban because they're the particular supplies, really, where we get roads.
There were options to use
Yep.
facilities,
Yep.
they can still come and swim in the
They don't
pools for
get
free,
streetlights, they
they
don't
use
get
a
footpaths, they don't get this
library.
and
mean, staff are often in the rural community doing bits of pieces and working with, doing service requests and assessing them, and certainly the roading is phenomenal.
Why don't we note it and look at it as a governance group as to whether or not there's something we can,
Well, really, we want examples.
Yeah.
or ask for examples of what they mean, specific examples.
Yeah.
David Campbell mentioned it, but I'm guessing that was in regards to road.
Yeah,
He
it
said that
wasn't,
there was
but
a rural urban imbalance.
there was somebody else who lived in, is it Marshall Road? I don't know, I remember Marshall Road.
I'll have a more comparison. It's probably that, roading, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't him, sorry. Oh, the Canning man.
So what is the perception, is there an imbalance?
No.
I think we do focus a lot on the town, but that's because we're
Facilities are in the town.
well, and we were required to provide a lot of the services like the water
Library, parks.
and wastewater
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. It doesn't
And the
look
residential,
like that.
average residential rates reflect that.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only thing that I could think of is possibly our rural reserves. Are we putting enough into them?
They certainly are being enhanced
Yes.
every year.
I mean, we're always open to proposals if there's, specific things.
You also got to think of the Wairarapa as a whole. Most people, or a lot of people live on the eastern side of Gladstone Way. Their main town is Masterton, and they're going to Masterton all the time. So, you know, people down Longbush, you know, it's the same sort of thing, and it's, we were like a suburb of Wellington sometimes, you know, facility-wise. People shop in Greytown and they go swimming in Masterton, and they live here. You know.
It's also easy to interact with the rural people as it is with the town community, because you can set yourself up somewhere in town and you sort of talk to a lot of people, whereas, I don't know, down at Belfield School, down at Gladstone School, but you're not going to see a lot of people, so it is a lot more difficult.
Certainly, myself and the rural community, I'll engage with them all the time, and if we get a request, we do with the Flat Point community, we go out and see them, and as long as we're available, we're always getting phone calls.
Okay, Carterton Park toilets need an upgrade.
So the locks have been replaced, haven't they?
Yeah.
This is more about a look rather than
Yeah, it was a pain to paint them, but there was an issue with the finish on there, wasn't
The anti-graffiti.
Anti-graffiti.
They did get touched up though, because they do look better now. I think it's just those planter boxes out the front need to be topped up and actually planted and then it will look bigger. But overall, I think they look fine. I did hear, actually, I was talking to Tom the other day, and apparently, Clint and the team do have, plans to do more planting in that little garden next to it. And it's gonna be more in line with the native planting that they've done elsewhere around the park, so that's great.
it? And I'm sure Glenn is on top of it already, the maintenance programs for things like toilets and that, there's a maintenance schedule.
Yes, there is. No one got on top of it.
You're getting on top of it.
I am, yes. Yeah. And I think Dave was just saying that the toilets do need to be painted. And there was submissions for someone to put a mural on there, so I'll follow up with all that.
Okay, thank you.
One, just around the frequency of cleaning and that, how often do they, is it every day or twice a day or every morning?
Mornings, early.
So every morning and then during the COVID levels, we had the Parks Reserves team doing a second and third at various points cleaning, so
Roman baths?
No.
Oh, Jill. Yes. Jill's being a party pooper.
Who was that?
That was the same lady who
She was
wanted
lovely.
a cat activity park as well. Oh, what was her name?
Just that I want to
Any
avoid.
favour?
Yeah, but certainly we will, if the opportunity arises in any
Yeah.
commercial activity, yes, we'll encourage it.
Potential business opportunity
Hotel,
somewhere.
so there's a couple of references to the hotel proposal.
I don't think anything's changed, has it? I mean, if someone was to come along with a compelling business case for a hotel, then council would have a look at it. I think is the long and short of it. You know?
It certainly plays a big role in the town centre rejuvenation of those conversations. And there's a work stream there that gets touched on.
But it's not something
It's
that
work in
council's doing.
progress. Yeah.
To rule it out would be premature. I like that New Plymouth idea with the club. You know, imagine if that was done up like that one in New Plymouth.
Okay, that's it on fund more communications.
I think she said clone Elisa.
Clone Elisa. I think we need to clone 2 Elisas.
Was that in your submission?
It wasn't actually, but I did think about doing a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, you didn't have time because you're so busy, eh?
Yeah.
Not as clever as Molly, you know?
You should have got your kids to come along.
Yeah.
So this is a question probably voiced to yourself, Jane, and possibly Lisa, but the comms team's under pressure, and there are times where it's severely under pressure. And I know there's some backup here, but with the expectations on that from our community of being informed, how do you perceive the future and our current capacity?
Yeah, so listening to a lot of your responses to a lot of submissions, you know, you're talking about telling the stories more differently or whatever. That absolutely, if you want to do that, then it is more advanced resource. So poor old Lisa was working 7 days a week, effectively. She doesn't get too much time off. She's on call all the time. So that will be a burnout for her. And it's, yeah, not great for us. So, yeah, I would very strongly support advanced resource.
I think
If I could put just the workload aspect of it into perspective, obviously any like resource decisions are yours, but just to give you a bit of an overview, I'm sure you're all aware of what I do, but during the boil water notice, yes, I worked like many other people here, I worked 12 days in a row, and also, you know, during lockdown it was pretty intense. I've got some resource and some backup, but it's, you know, usually people from other roles trying to cover. There is no other comms backup for our council, and when the boil water notice came back on again, I was actually on bereavement leave that week, and, you know, it falls to people like Jane and Carrie when she was here to take on that role as well. And on top of everything I do as a normal comms is also the media requests have increased quite significantly from 2 years ago when I started, so especially with the new LDR reporting. So I've gone from maybe 5 requests a week, I get at least 12 now, and that's all me on top of everything else that we're required to do just regularly.
Now, I think the social media thing has ramped up as well, so we're getting a lot more engagement through social media, and that does take quite a lot of monitoring, even if we're not responding to everything.
And I was going to say too, as in the couple of years since you've been on, and Kate prior to that, the comms for council have increased, and I think by doing that, and people now have an expectation of that's where the level is, but they will always want more, and I think that's just that will not abate. And the more stories that we do need to get out to the public, because, you know, going through some of the submissions and reading some of them, we kind of going, oh, if they knew the full story, and that just highlights to me that, and knowing the hours that you work, and I mean, I see you responding to stuff on social media at like 10 o'clock at night, because somebody's commented on something on the council page, and boom, there's a response.
Not to do that anymore.
No, nobody deal. But it's that's to be applauded, but it's at detriment to you have a life outside of.
Yes, and I think you have to look at roles like Jane's role, for example, when I want, you know, a week off all my kids for school holidays, she's having to do the 12 media requests on top of her role, and that's, in my opinion, that's not feasible.
From my role, it was valuable during the board ordinance, you know, a couple of TV interviews to actually give Elise a call on a Saturday morning and say, I've got this coming up, can I meet with you? And half an hour before the interview, we just go through a series of questions, because, you know, on the TV, you haven't got your paperwork in front of you, you've got to preempt, and that's just invaluable, and having that access is really, it's huge. But also, you listen to our submitters, a lot of them, the information was misinformed, and it was like, because we need to get the story out there more, so, but it does come at a cost, and that's...
I think there's two roles in comms. I mean, one is this reactive thing, which we're kind of inundated with at the moment. You know, the boil water notice, the media requests, there's constant want for information from outside. But the bit that suffers, because I mean, all that has to get done, the bit that suffers is that proactive, behind the scenes, you know, cultivating the story, or cultivate's the wrong word, but, you know, being able to craft the message ahead of time to try and, you know, get ahead of the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for example, you've all noticed that the page on the website with the wastewater treatment plant hasn't been updated with photos for some time. Matt takes them constantly. That's a capacity thing for me, and unfortunately, putting photos on the website kind of falls low on priorities when we do have things like those urgent media requests, where if we don't reply, we don't get that fair reporting in there and the accurate information out there. And or things like the boil water notice, you know, even the fire season changed during that time, and I couldn't update that because there were other things that took priority.
And as you said, the website's needing information to be updated constantly as things change, and that's kind of, yeah.
I mean, the call for transparency and more information from council is definite. You know, people want that.
Yeah, but they want specifics.
Yes.
So what they want on the wastewater is they don't want photos. They actually want budgets and you know, understanding what's actually going on.
Yes, that's a consequence of not being able to provide regular updates up to this point. Like, I think what Elisa was saying is you know, if there'd been more capacity to keep that website updated and have more current information presented, there'd be less sense of something's being held back or something's missing. You know what I mean? And I mean, there'd still be people wanting specific information, but it wouldn't.
Those people are going into the agendas. They're actually going to the agendas for their information. They're not going to the website.
But I think some other people who haven't actually gone and asked for figures of, and there are people in the submissions, and I know if I was trying to find something I've highlighted, sort of saying, looked at the website, couldn't find something. I'm just using the website as an example.
The website does have a problem with its search function.
Yeah, there is an issue with the search function.
I've got people ringing me to say, hey, where are the results of the by-election? And so apparently you can't, if you type in elections, plural, it didn't bring up anything, yeah? So, even it took me about 15 minutes to find it then.
Yeah, no, we realise there's issues.
Yeah, there's real major issues.
Yeah, but that's having the capacity to address those.
Yeah.
So, this decision we don't have to make, but as a starting point, what would an ease of a solution look like?
I think additional FTE.
A full-time FTE?
Yeah. That would be my recommendation to you.
So is the workload thing a constant, or is it certain pressure points?
Well, it's.
And then would we be better off contracting someone during those pressure points or contracting
So at the moment, what Elisa's not doing is, as you talked about, a lot of the proactive comms that we're just not doing that. So even that's in business as usual, we're not doing that.
Okay.
So there is pressure times. So that combined with the fact that I think there is an expectation for more proactive comms that is an FTE in my assessment.
You have to think about the things that you've also signed off on today as well, like things like the town centre. That's, I already feel like we need to communicate a bit more about what's going on there. But again,
The trails program.
I think if you go down the contracting route, you're going to still be picking and choosing what you're communicating and what you're not, and it will get very expensive.
If we go down the contracting route, we'll pay for an FTE and get a 0.6.
Yeah.
And you also, it takes a while, or we'll take a bit of in understanding of how we work and how we function, and to have that insight and information is invaluable by being permanent, I suppose.
Would it work with an FTE having like a cadetship type, probably wrong word,
Kind of already do, don't we?
Lisa, she's a good.
No, with Regan.
Yeah, Regan's aspect is more helping with, so he's the one that's going to be helping do the website review, which is absolutely fantastic. If we have to pay an actual IT person to do that, it would be very expensive and we wouldn't have the budget.
So he's graphics,
He does a graphic design and he's going to be doing the website. I'm trying to upskill him as he goes, but he's not from a comms background in terms of communicating things. You need somebody who can write and look at key messages and get those out. That's what we're lacking. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
When we did the long-term plan, that was the putting together of that, and the sort of, that was put out to another party.
The Times Age did the graphics.
They did the design, yeah.
So if we had another FTE, would we be able to maybe do that in-house, or would that still be?
Well, we will do that in-house now because we've got Regan, so we
Yeah.
brought him on and we've justified that on the basis that we're saving money by not going out to the
Cool, okay.
external providers to provide.
So basically put another FTE in helping Alyssa and Regan, we could possibly do some more of the stuff that we possibly put out, we could do in-house. So there might be some cost savings from the output that we
I
achieve.
think we've already banked those cost savings
That's all we could get.
with Regan, yeah, who's also actually helps with the event centre, but
So this is more about increasing
this is
our capacity.
communications and engagement
Yeah.
rather than, that's.
So would it work?
It's doing, basically duplicating the list.
So would it work on 0.5 an FTE, or would you need a 0.2?
You get some benefit from the 0.5, but you won't meet the expectations of who.
There's probably a lot of other people within the organisation that could benefit from Elisa's skill, some of Elisa's skills as well, to sort of get their messages out as well. You're probably trying to help them, but just don't have time.
Yeah, like I said, I met with the building team before Christmas to help them because they're so under the pump, and we've had Erin helping them part-time to process consent, and she's noticed things. A lot of over-the-counter inquiries could have been solved through the information on the website being easier to find and easier to read. I met with them and wrote down everything that they wanted. Haven't had time to do it, and we're in May, and that's something that I see as being very urgent because that team is really under the pump processing more consents than ever, and something as simple as updating the website information and making it easier for our residents. And it's just the capacity thing, it really is.
So,
and I feel awful that we can't help them in that way.
So Regan that you're talking about, and you're training him at certain things.
Yeah.
Can he change and be your understudy and we find someone to do Regan's role in?
No.
Regan's really good at graphic design and he's grown in that role.
Yeah, and him doing
Just
the website.
Comms is
thing
quite specialist.
Yeah, you need somebody from a communication or a marketing background or a journalist, something along those lines. You need somebody who can write well, pull out key messages and turn it around quickly. That's what we don't have. So, like I said, during the boil water notice, and I wasn't here, you need somebody who can get out that information to tell people what the situation is, what we're doing, what we need from them, so that people aren't up in arms about we don't understand what's happening.
It's also about having that sixth sense about anticipating how
Yeah,
the
what
phrase,
people are going
how
to
a
want
particular
to know.
phrasing might elicit a particular response.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that could then help him with what you were talking about, the climate emergency messaging, comms,
Well, so, yeah, that'll help getting out all Melanie's messages as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
like, just,
Public facing climate response.
yeah.
So this, what effect will have on the long-term plan? Regarding FTE?
It'll probably cost, total cost,
1%.
this is probably a worst case scenario.
Ongoing.
I
Well, we're
think as
doing
well
it
during,
then.
so if you get a just to kind of answer your question a bit more about the kind of person to do the role, during lockdown when I was in the EOC, we split my role across 3 people and I was still overseeing and guiding those 3 people, and they were fantastic. They really stepped out of their comfort zone and really delivered, but it's just so much more work if you're not already in this space. Sorry, Russell.
That's what I was going to say. This is wrong words. We're doing it badly at the moment just because there's too much of it to do.
Yes, so we kind of gone like this in terms of proactive comms. We kind of amped it up and now it's kind of
So we had
gone
nothing.
back again.
We got Kate, she built it up, we've had you on board since, it's got better, and now I think that people just want more, you know?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
It is,
Yeah,
I'm
but
pumping
having
out
said that, not too
probably
many
twice
people
as
ask
much
for it.
work as I was two
I
years
mean,
ago.
how many submissions have we got with people wanting more communication?
It's
Well,
not
is it-
specifically about communications, but it's been sort of more information on so many things across
I
the
think
board,
that-
which would
well,
come through
from my
comms.
perspective, people want information about finances, so we'd be better off putting that money into people
But
that can do that
as
project
you've
management, finance.
Said those are very specific people looking for very specific information. That's almost like Lagoima type response. We're talking more
No,
about.
it's not, no, it's what they would like, regular monthly updates.
But it's only very specific people asking for that specific information.
I don't know
What?
if we can provide that to members, like monthly updates.
No, in agendas.
What we're talking more about here is about just that regular communication with the electorate to keep them updated with the run-of-the-mill stuff, which some of that might trigger specific questions like what you're suggesting, but we're not talking about, it's not about every last detail being put on the website as it happens. It's about keeping the...
Proactive messaging
Yeah.
as opposed to reactive.
But look what's on our radar coming up too, Three Waters reform. We're going to have to get our comms right on that, and I know there's going to be assistance, but we've got our own story to tell, and it's going to be difficult as.
And the RMA reform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I heard. So, do you think getting I don't know, 0.5, we're looking at maybe increasing it in 12 months, if need be? I know it's not.
Do we have to make a decision now?
Yeah,
Can
we
we
need,
get a
why do we
report?
wait for our new CEO to come and then they can look at the structure and decide at that point? I mean, from my perspective, looking at the weaknesses that we've got in this council, it is that whole project management side of things. And if I was to put money into staff, then that's where, we obviously need something there.
Fair, it's a fair comment.
Yep.
And I don't think it is, I don't think our project management's that
Yeah, I think we're kind of digressing, because you can't talk about project management with someone who wasn't involved with the project right from the start. So that makes the big difference. So that's been difficult for Matt not to have been involved in the whole design, procurement and everything right from the very beginning. So you can't really put that on the project manager. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the comment I made, the reason I'm not agreeing with Jill over particularly the project management, just that we do have a change of CE and an interim coming through, and at that point there will be some, I guess, a new eye will get cast over the staff across the organisation, and they may choose to apply that extra resource.
So what I'm going to say to you is if you want us to do more in the comms space and engagement space, but particularly the comms space, we will need more resource. It doesn't matter if you've got a new chief executive or not, that is your reality. So
So
I think
I-
now is the time
as
that
a
we
council,
actually
if
make
we
a
want to
decision
do
whether you want more.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jill thinks it should be project management, and what I was just agreeing with Jill is that, well, maybe actually it's worth waiting a couple of
Or
months and
putting
letting
it
the
off
next
as
person.
putting it off as putting off doing any more comms than we currently do.
So you keep talking about we need to tell the story on this and that, we need to tell the story, we need to tell the story. And it's been, that has been, not just you, but it has been around the table, that has just been
I'm not,
the main thing.
I'm not walking back from my position that I agree with Jane, that I think we need that extra person. I'm just saying I can see where Jill's coming from, and I think it makes sense.
A new operational leader, and that person might say, hey, you know, it could be in the finance field, we've had difficulties with finance now, but Kelly's come on board, that might be okay. But, and we have 3 water stuff, but it's just that that person will actually have the ability to decide where its resources go.
We're the governance team, and we're leading what goes out into the community, and I'm hearing that we need to be telling that story more, and I feel like we need to, and I think we've got to need to make that call. I mean, if we decide not to make a call, fair enough, but we need to not put it off and maybe make a decision now whether we will or we won't. Yeah. And whether we, I mean, as an example, 0.5 will help. 1 would probably be really good.
1 would be optimal.
Yep. Or none.
2 would be optional.
2 would be optimal.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to sort of look at it, and that is the communities out there, obviously. Now, only 206 people decided to fill in a form. It was very, very straightforward. You'd go there, and in 30 seconds you'd got onto an online submission, boom, boom, boom. And as we know, probably not all of them read all of the options correctly. So I think, yeah, I'm not too sure whether really people want to hear more from council at all, to be honest. I think they just want everything working as best they possibly can.
But like reading through some of the submissions, I felt like there was a lot of misconceptions in some of the submissions as well, and like our website, that should be up to date.
Daily.
Not even daily, but you know, at the bare minimum monthly, it should be updated. If we can't fulfil those basic functions, we need to increase it. I think increasing our comms capacity is going to help us across the board in all of the activities that we're doing.
Whether it's our building department or...
I mean, if it saved effort, I mean, people getting the wrong end of the stick because they can't find the right information and coming in grumpy and occupying the people at front of house for half an hour while they try to get to the nub of it. You know, if that information was, or the understanding was more readily available, you know, so that people didn't misunderstand how things happen. I'm inclined to agree with.
I mean, half an FTE is not going to make everyone have all the information they want when they need it, and they know where to look. They're not going to solve everyone's issues around that. But I think we've clearly heard, and we can all see that our comms department is very stretched. And I think as a governance team, we have an obligation in some ways to at least address it in some manner.
Where would they work from? Have they got space to work? Honest question.
Yeah, we would squeeze them.
Especially if they're part-time, they're hot this summer.
But you're right, we have an obligation for well-being.
Form's a huge part of what we provide now, I think. And as we mentioned, the miscommunication that's been around, you get another person in there with 0.5 say that communication might change.
Yeah.
Get out that more of that information they want to hear.
Well,
So at least they're fully informed.
we could solve some of the issues that have arisen in the past few months before they actually became issues, I think. Some of them.
Okay, so I'm going to put a line in the sand and just go around the table and just ask everyone's opinion on whether you say 0, 0.5 or 1 or something else. So what?
I'd go 1.
1.
Wait when you see come.
I'll go 1, but 0.5 less is more, so anything's be better than what we've got. anything more than what we've got already would be better. Sorry,
Having
Elise.
a 0.5 additional.
You know what I mean.
She likes gin.
And I was going to say I concurred with you. But I'm not going. Yeah, I'm kind of half, so 0.5.
Okay. I'm one. So are we're aware of what it's going to have an impact on rates?
I would think.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And it's, people are saying, you know, lower rates, so. But if they actually want more information, they want lower rates.
I don't 100% agree with that. I agree people do want lower rates, but I think what has come through loud and clear, and as Steve was saying, the miscommunication that has been out there, and Rebecca, you mentioned it as well, I think that is actually more detrimental to this council than being able to actually get clear messaging out, being proactive. I mean, as we've heard, Elise is just reactive. That's her whole job at the moment, is reactive comms, which is not ideal in any board or organisation. I think we need to start getting back to front footing some stuff.
It's not for us though. We're not doing this.
No, I mean us council, not.
Yeah,
not
but we're not
us
doing
as
it to
members.
make our job easier. We're doing it so that the electorate or the community can better participate in democracy. You know, to better participate in, you know, and better understand and engage with what's happening here, so that we can be properly informed by them, not distracted by issues that aren't issues, and make good decisions for the community. So it's kind of, to me, it's for the community. It's not to make our job easier or more comfortable.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying about making our job easier. I'm meaning actually across the board of the organisation and the community will be actually informed as opposed to.
And the difference, if we go ahead, will be very measurable. And
When
YouTube
you say miscommunications, give us some examples of miscommunications.
Ooh, I'll have to go back through here.
I mean,
I'm trying to think one off the top of my head. The QV evaluations is one of them. I don't know if we can necessarily resolve that because it is
We always get that.
Jill, you mentioned
complicated. I don't
water
know.
tanks, you know, the water tank, yes or no, you know, getting good comms out on that, so it can be
Well, that would
understood.
be quite straightforward. If you write a very quick little article, sort of that one out. I can probably do that. I think I've actually got one. I've got a thing here. Yeah, got it.
Okay, so we just,
I do.
Actually, some examples came out of Ron Shaw's one off the top of my head as well. Like a lot of the things he had suggested, we have discussed, and I thought actually we just need a bit more clarification around that, either in our comms or in the LTP. But yeah, that's one off the top of my head.
yep, so all those in favour of one, just want to raise your hand. Or is that 5? Are those against? Okay. And
0.75.
There needs to be a motion that you vote for or against.
So you will, at the end of all of this, we'll just bring together all the ones that we
yeah, so we'll move on, and that'll be in the resolution.
We may need to take a few of them separately.
We got an easy one?
That's funding.
Yes.
What was it? Dark skies, 5 to 6,000 for the dark skies.
No,
was
it was
it March
shared.
and 13?
No, shared. It's,
So
Our share would be.
our share was half of the first 2 bits,
yeah.
which was about 500,000.
What number are they?
161.
So it was half of the 10,400. That was shared between South priority numbers.
I've got down here 5 to 6, I don't know if it's 5.6 or 5 to 6 kg yet, I can't read my writing.
I think it's 5 to 6.
Well, I think it was, yeah, because they want 10,400 for.
Plus the 3,000.
Eh?
I think plus the 3,000.
I think they said they
She
would
said the events was from some other
get- yeah,
source.
from other
Okay.
source, yeah,
It's just the 10.
10,400. Half of it.
5 to 6 days.
Okay, Rob said he's in favour.
Yeah.
Russell?
Yeah.
Rebecca?
I'm in favour of it, but maybe we should take it out of our grants budget.
So this
I
was
agree.
to fund an coordinator.
I know, but we can
It's a project.
take that from our grants budget, and it means it's slightly lower, just because it's outside of our policy, but I would be quite comfortable funding this within our grants budget, but our policy doesn't allow it.
Sure. Favour? Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, I'm in favour.
Steve?
Very much so.
Okay, I'm in favour too.
So do you want to take the equivalent of the community grants fund?
No.
How much do we have in our MOU funding budget, and then how much is in the community grants budget?
Community grants is like 75k, but that's one upper wide.
That's local, that's
It doesn't-
Carterton and
It doesn't apply that policy, you've got to be really careful making exceptions that don't apply the policy, because then all of a sudden, when you disallow the next one because it doesn't apply the policy, they say, but you allowed that one, so.
that's why Rebecca's talking about pulling it out of the community
That's why
grants
we're
funding and
making
putting it
decision,
into
yeah.
the other
Just
the
same sort of
MOU
thing.
funding.
It's,
Yeah, same sort of thing.
Just so
just
it's not,
fund it,
Yeah.
just fund it from the budget, but don't take it out of community grants, just put it,
I agree.
Okay,
fund it.
I agree.
$6 grand.
yeah.
That's the-
Okay. Thank you.
Almost there, activity part.
Yep, done.
Russell's gonna have it at his
I'm gonna
house,
donate some money towards
Penny
what
tail.
we get done.
at Reese at Russell's house.
Yeah.
Activity part. We could,
Next to Sparks Park.
So that's also you could incorporate the Roman baths.
Yep, that can
we
be.
could do it some learn to swim
Actually, yeah,
lessons.
because the people that bought our place love cats, so they'd probably love to put one in.
Well, right
Dogs
there,
chasing
the
around the
It's
exercise.
got a great
One of the
associate
people
Sparks
that bought our
Park.
house,
So,
they
no,
love
I really think we should take a little break.
What's the reasoning?
About 7 acres
Well,
there.
actually, it's a yes, because it's at Russell's place, Queen
Start from the dogs to exercise with.
So I assume it's enough. Marketing Carterton. So that sort of is a little bit related to the extra costs, but this is broader because this was a request to do more marketing.
By whom?
So destination, market, region.
I think there's new partnerships developing, and I think we should just enable those to do that. And
Carry on with current activity.
Right, so the best one, the one that's last, sorry,
Oh.
slide.
Are we really
Yeah,
last?
go.
This is slide.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna do a separate
Sorry.
recording as well,
Yeah,
if that's okay.
did Carrie have a figure in
Slightly silly.
there for playground equipment at the swimming pool?
15,000,
Yeah, but it wouldn't fund this, this is really just for maintenance, so we don't have any big new equipment. We've had some, the last, is it last annual plan, I think we had some money, said, well, you guys were talking about putting some money in to do some big well stuff, like water feature, the ring type stuff. What we found is we could afford to do for a bit of money, and I can't remember how much it was.
No, it's in this, it was part of the LGP discussions.
Was it?
Um,
Oh, yeah, it was too, that's right.
Wasn't
Yeah,
a
we
lot.
could do a few flush boards, I think, with the.
The,
Yeah, it wasn't
I
a
think
lot.
where we ended up was that 15k would be our contribution, and I'm quite keen, otherwise to like lead some community fundraising or something.
This sort of
to
thing
top
would
it up.
attract.
Yeah.
One of the service clubs would probably take it on.
Or what about, leading go, like a, That Pledge Me GoFundMe page thing, community,
I'll
give a little, that's it, it's been a long day.
I'll just raise it because Dale mentioned to me, and it was a solution. You could cut the roof off the existing slide to enable visibility, but that wouldn't extend, make it bigger or anything. But there's definitely an option to sell the slide anyway if we put another one in. Yeah.
I'd be cautious about putting Carterton District Council on a GoFundMe page.
But it's a community-led fundraising, community-led fundraising for a new slide at the swimming pool.
There was an option to shift that slide to the middle pool.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, there was too.
Yeah.
And provide a new slide.
Yeah. So providing it's safe and that the roof could be cut off it to enable visibility, which is a health and safety risk.
So how much do you want?
Well, what do we think a slide, like, I thought the ones that Molly put up on the screen were actually very reasonable, as an expectation. How much do we think a slide might cost like that? 30k or something?
I'd say more.
I think we really need to get some costings and designs, sizes, etc., before we can make a decision. But I was do we need to put a budget figure on it now? Is that
I mean,
what
what you
you're
could
saying,
do is, I mean, if you want to do this with co-funding led by the community, which I think is probably really appropriate, and I think if you're a busy place to build and you're going to attract a lot of funding, you should just pick a number that you think would be reasonable for the council to be as a sort of seed money, and then that will then help attract more money.
Okay, I propose 10,000.
Do we have any depreciation reserves we can pull from, or can we pull from our
Not for that equipment, no.
reserves fund?
playground equipment fund?
Possibly, but that means you're not using it elsewhere.
I was going to suggest $5,000 and then see how we went, and if at the end of the project, if there was a shortfall, the council might be able to consider topping up.
Do we know roughly how much these slides are going to cost?
I'm just seeing if I
I think about 45 grand, something like that, once we bought something decent and installed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest $5,000 to start with an option to maybe do some top up.
With $5,000 in a community-led program.
Yeah.
With Rebecca and myself as the lead, or whoever wants to be the lead.
So I'm just looking for that 15k. Did we end up putting it in our capital expenditure? We didn't. I thought we agreed to like a lesser amount and then to top it up for fundraising. But all I can see is there's a 19 grand in 2023 and 12 grand in 2024. But I'm assuming I'm not sure if that relates to it or not. I mean, this is something we want to do in the next financial year. We don't want to have to put it off. There is also the budget for swimming pool building strengthening, which is very specific, but if there's anything left over in that budget at the end of the day, possibly that could go towards it as well.
This one.
It's been priced as well.
Prices on this one.
the price on that one.
So this is almost what she put up, that's 25k US. So if you call it 50k with install and some shipping and stuff, it might be quite a little closer. But I don't think we're out of the ballpark with those prices.
It's insane the prices that you can pay for this sort of stuff.
This is in stock, to order it now.
Who's
got the credit card?
Who's sponsoring it?
No, it's your Recreonics.
That's
Give
the
you a
other
break,
thing,
sorry,
local
April.
businesses might get behind it as well. That's a great community
I just
initiative.
think we need to have a realistic fundraising amount. We don't want it to be so out of reach that it's not going to happen for the next 5 years. So I'd be inclined to revisit that 15k figure that we originally
So
had.
why don't you say up to a number, and then you can maximise the public donation element. but you've got enough to get going the line. So rather than say identify an S-rate number, identify an up to number. And then what we'll do with budget, we'll put the budget number in terms of what we're going to put in the plan. We'll have a look and see if we've got money in there already.
Is it classed as an asset or operating expenditure?
It will
It's a
be
new
an
one,
asset.
CapEx.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and part of that will be shifting the other slide to the other pool and investigating the roof removal. Yeah.
So would you like to name it up to a number?
Okay, so when we go around the table, and everyone's just going to say what they think a figure will be, and then we'll follow that discussion up to Steve.
Well, Kerry had 15k written in there, so I'm glad that there's 15k.
Right?
Yeah, I'd actually go for a lower figure and keep the community behind it, and I think that, I'm talking 10k.
Like Ryan, your bigger.
I like 15k. I would like to see if we could possibly fund that from our reserves funding, so it's not typically rates funded. I don't know the last time that we actually had new capital expenditure at those pools. It is a very, very long time, so I think it would be justified coming out of that reserves fund, personally, if we can.
Okay, what's on?
I was thinking the 5.
Yeah.
I had in my head 15 from what Carrie's had said previously. I can't remember when we were, but yeah, I'll go 10 or 15.
I was thinking 10's a nice round number and a good starting point for a fundraising push.
Yeah, no, I initiated 10, so I'm happy with 10. So I think the majority was 10, are we okay to go with 10? And a good community fund project and get some costs.
That's up to 10.
Up to.
Up to 10.
Yep.
Okay.
So who will be leading that project? I guess we can't start it until 1st of July, or we can start fundraising, can't we? Cool.
So we need to start getting costings and designs and stuff.
If we sort on the design, and obviously talking with Molly would be very helpful there.
Yeah.
And get some costings, and then we're away.
Who would be the
Can't
staff?
Pie be involved? No, they're too mixed out with Carrington, aren't
Yeah, I
they?
don't think so. They might be able to contribute towards it. Who would be the staff lead for that?
Linda.
Cool.
And how about all of us councillors are part of the
Yeah.
promotion?
And just an idea, I think that we need to obviously involve Molly and Superior School probably in that. And even if we get all the 3 schools behind, 3 or 4 primary schools in that area behind it all, and I'm sure the funding will be generated by the kids and the parents, and even if you know, like with the council administer, take the lead, or a service club do, or a different club. But St Mary's School might want to be the lead.
We'll have that conversation with you.
Well done, Molly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Will one of you actually call Molly?
Yeah, I told her I was going to
That'd be great.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on back to the report.
Can I just say, I wanted to discuss one more thing, which didn't actually really come up.
No.
It was around, so we talked about the bypass and parking and that sort of thing, but I'd really like us to do a review of the traffic flow through the town centre and look at our parking and whether or not we add in some more disabled parking, disability
Yeah, so that's on the other matters list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you've got a whole list of other matters that don't directly relate to the economic plan that you get to go through.
Okay,
So
perfect.
EU partnerships, logging, more trains, more buses, branding the town, and cross-eye institute services. So there's a whole.
Oh, put that I couldn't read.